Okay, so guys, welcome to the curriculum committee meeting today. It is now 5 p.m. on 10/18/22, and we are going to start off by being given a presentation on our literacy curriculum committee update.
Thank you for the opportunity. Come back around. I think our goal today is just to get everyone up to speed on the literacy process, resource review process that we've been using, and kind of give you an update on where we're at in our timeline. We certainly have not finished the process at all, but really wanted to just make sure that everybody's kind of on the same page of where we've been. We started with the, presentation. We'll include some things that we talked about in February and then reviewed in May. So some of it might look familiar, but we just wanted to make sure we were capturing the journey one more time. So our process really starts with, we had talked about and really focused in on what are the key steps that we're going to have to work through as we engage in this resource adoption process. And so this process that we have here, we'll kind of revisit each of these steps as we go through and talk, but this really is taken from a guiding document from EdReports, which is a curriculum resource review platform, and they talk through about how to go through that adoption process. And so we used a lot of that guidance to help develop this process that we're using here.
So you could see there in step one, they're talking about evaluating and developing a district lens. So looking at our own ELA data, gathering up some more data from the staff, as we'll talk about in just a second here, and then also being able to review our power standards and make sure that we are clear on what do we want to make sure that kids know at the end of each grade level to be able to know whether or not the curriculum is meeting the needs that we are looking for as a district. So the first step, again, Pam mentioned that we had shared this already, so I won't go into as deep of detail on it, but we did send out a survey to K-5 classroom teachers, EL, reading, special education teachers in those K-5, and then 6-8 as well, and then principals. So we were getting input from stakeholders that would be utilizing a new ELA resource, and also to be able to get input on our current resource. How is it meeting our needs? So you can see this is our K2 spreadsheet from the survey that we gave in December again of last year. You can see the way that it's organized. The first column there is importance. So on a 1 to 5 scale, the teachers could determine where they thought each of these components was in the mindset of importance. Is it 5 being most important, 1 being the least important? So you can see there the importance of 4.346, or you can see down in the individualized differentiated instruction and EL special education resources was a very high number, very close to 5. That's saying that's very important to our staff, that the ELA curriculum has that as a component. The second column there, current resource, how well are the units of study meeting that specific component? Again, on a 1 to 5 scale. And then the third column there is the gap. So you can see that the gap for student choice is not very large. That's saying the current resource is meeting that need fairly well. As you move down, the gap gets larger. So you can see that the biggest gap in the current curriculum as compared to the importance is the EL and special education resources. So that's something that they're saying they really need at the K2 level. As we move on then 3-5, you'll notice some of those same trends, right? Student choice is something that they're saying units of study are doing well. The EL special education resources down at the bottom there where the gap is getting larger, and word study is a need that we need to focus in on more.
Hey Jen, sorry to interrupt, but is there any significance to the colors that you've chosen here?
The yellow ones there are just the largest. So if you're wondering what the most important two factors are the yellow ones there. Okay. And then the green is the highest score in the current resource. So they're saying student choice is something that is strongly represented in the units of study, and then the lowest are the red ones.
Okay, thank you.
Again, this is the 6-8 classroom teachers. So student choice again, you see is high on the list, and then those EL and special education resources, that gap is the largest at this grade level as well. So each grade band was provided this survey independently, and they all came back with such similar results. So we're seeing that there's definitely this trend at all grade levels saying that we need to have more differentiated resources for small groups and for EL and special education resources. So that's something that we were able to take that data from the survey and say, this is something that if we are looking at something new, needs to be very, very well addressed in any future curricular resources. And this would be the.
Hey, Jen, thank you for putting this together. Just in looking over the data here, it looks like there's a gap in just about every category, unless I'm missing something. Is that right?
Yeah, they didn't feel as though the importance, the rating of importance didn't equally align to how well our resources meeting it in any category. You're right. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It came close, you know, when we look at in student choice, it came the closest overall, but it definitely our current, what the importance is, what do we believe is most important in a resource, and how important is that each of those factors, and then the current resource, how well is it doing? And basically what folks are saying through their responses is it's good, but we'd like more, is really what it amounts to. And in every category, there's a higher degree of more.
Sure. Follow-up question to that. You know, some of these are pretty self-explanatory, but you know, when I see things like social emotional content and culturally responsive, you know, is there any way, could you guys define that, or are there any examples of that?
Social emotional content reflects just teaching students good kind of social skills, and also teaching the importance of being good human beings. So content that includes some of that, because we're trying to infuse it through the curriculum rather than a standalone. Culturally responsive really is, are there opportunities for students to see themselves reflected in the literature that is being presented, and in the characters and things like that within the literature.
Okay. And just out of curiosity, how did we arrive at those units that were, I guess, gauging on the survey? Is that just standard in the?
Pretty much, yeah. When we go through the research and take a look at what are the key components of different aspects of literature and resources that you're using to teach students literature, these are the things that come into play in terms of key aspects that would indicate that a resource is going to help meet the needs of our current populations of students. And so we see that social emotional needs are higher now, so resources that reflect that are something that we want to look at. Culturally responsive, we have greater diversity among our student population, so taking a look at do the students see them in the characters within literature, and is that there?
And how long have we been using that criteria?
How long?
Yeah.
Just for this resource. This is the resource review. We had to pull that together for this resource review.
Okay, so if I'm understanding that right, does that mean since we've been using Calkins or whatever?
I don't know about what they use for the criteria for Calkins in my time.
Okay.
So this is looking at just right now. These were the content pieces that we looked at as we engaged in this process, and so we just listed them and asked folks to rate them. And this is how our staff and the people that we serve, all of the groups that we surveyed, this is how they rated those factors. They could have said not important at all.
Right. And I'd just be curious to know if there's any studies that have been done that would, you know, maybe weight these or give more weight to certain areas, right? I see things like, you know, grammar, right? I can see that being pretty critical in phonics. But, you know, personally, again, unless I'm just missing something, I'm not sure how much social emotional content or, culturally responsive would weigh into someone's ability to, to improve the literacy targets that we're after.
It's not about improving the literacy, it's about the importance of these factors in some of the resources that we have available to students. So, you think about home connection is one of the things. There's not really it's not necessary part of taking a look at a literacy resource, but we know that when we look at our ability to really kind of grow students across the board, having a connection with home is one of those factors that we take a look at. So these are things that go beyond just the skill development piece into how do we also engage students as a part of this process. And some of these are engagement pieces. Social studies and science integration doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to grow student reading abilities and reading skills, but there's an avenue there for us to say we're going to engage students in those types of thinking, different types of literature that meet those needs.
Okay, that sounds great, but again, I'm just having a dialogue here with you guys. So I just think that it might be worth some further thought on, how do we prioritize, the areas that we really all want to improve in right now. And I think the big one that we're looking at is obviously the proficiency with reading. So I would just encourage all of us, and again, I'm not saying these are wrong. I'm just saying I'd like to understand them better. And, for my seat, looking back on my experience in public education, maybe I just missed this growing up, back in the 80s and 90s, but, there wasn't a whole lot of talk about social, emotional, or culturally responsive, but we spent a lot of time on phonics and that type of thing. So, and the kids in my school, were, we had probably similar demographics here, and I don't remember, some of the challenges that we're seeing. So all I'm suggesting is, maybe we reconsider what areas we focus on as we move forward, and just make sure that the areas that we are focusing on are really going to address the root problem, which is, in my opinion, literacy, that we have to improve.
This is not the criteria by which we are looking at prioritizing things. This was meant to take a look at our current resource and say, in the scope of all of these things, how important are these things, and how well does our current resource do this, to make a determination of whether or not we were even going to go through the process of looking at another adoption. And so this was all preliminary conversation and data collection. This became the impetus to say, our data is saying we've got to do something different. Our folks who are implementing the curriculum are saying we've got to do something different. So that's where this fed into. Are some of these into our criteria? Absolutely. Are there pieces of the criteria that rank higher than others? Absolutely. And the team is investigating that right now.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what the outcome of that is.
And with the mindset that this was a survey, we would have been able to have possibly gotten the feedback that cultural responsiveness is not something that is important to the staff. We wanted to be able to see if there was anything in there that people said, no, that isn't something that we are focused on. And that was part of gathering up that data. So again, then this is the K-8 specialists. So this is reading teachers, EL teachers, special education teachers at K-8. This is their specific data set from that survey. And we again see the differentiated intervention materials as being something that we need more of in what we are looking at.
Jen, that's probably a silly question. Can you just tell me what student choice is? Is it in reading materials? Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure though, and I just wanted to clarify.
Students being able to choose what they read, and also you can have student choice in writing as well, where they get a little bit more say in what they're writing.
I thought so, but like,
Yeah.
so I wanted to be first.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then this is the principal data from that same survey. And you see again with the 5.0, like that's as important as you can get in the eyes of the principals, those EL and special education resources being something we would need to focus really heavily on moving forward. And then I'll just let you take a quick peek. We went through these ones before. The strengths of the units of study, again, we saw those coming up on the list, but this was just the comment section at the bottom where they could add things that maybe weren't on the survey items. So these were some of the things that they were focusing on as strengths. And then on the next slide there, the needs that came up in the comments, again, of all of those different stakeholders for the units of study. And you see that does not provide clear plans for differentiated small groups. We saw that definitely represented throughout the data. So then by getting that and getting the idea of what is being met and what is not being met, helped to set us up for the next steps in the conversation, which Pam will talk about next.
So that really allowed us then to take a look at the historical data combination with the survey data and make that decision to move to an adoption process. Part of that, what we did was took a look at establishing some criteria checklists. And so we utilized a rubric from Wiley Blevins, who is an expert in the science of reading, as a starting point for determining the criteria through which we would look at resources, and added some of the components from that survey into it as well. And then went through several rounds of connecting with the team that we'll talk about in a little bit, connecting with them to say, give us your feedback so that we could make sure we had high quality evaluation criteria checklists. So the team that has been doing the work is represented here. We looked for a cross section of folks from different schools, different roles, and also a cross section of folks some who liked the units of study and felt really good about it, and others who said, no, we need something different because the units of study really aren't meeting the needs of students. So we banded them in K2, 3, 5, and 6, 8 groups so that we have the ability to have folks really dig in and focus in on a specific grade band in order to do the resource review. So this just represents the team members who've been engaged in the process with us along the way. And then you have a copy of our timeline here. We, as we indicated last spring, we had a meeting with the team to talk about the work and what they were being charged with, and then began really our process by going and working through at the K5 level, the identification of speaking and language, or speaking and listening and language power standards, along with just a review of the reading and writing standards to make sure the standards really are forming the foundation for a key piece of what we are looking at when we look at the resource. How well do they align to allowing us to meet those standards? So that work occurred in the summer. And then this fall, we have been going through as grade band teams, some vendor presentations and then resource reviews. So our folks have been digging into that. That process is still continuing. We just had a session last night, and folks at 6-8 level are continuing to dig into the resources and take a look at the checklist and find where are the resources meeting that indicator on the checklist and where are their gaps. And so I have to say, in observing folks going through that process, they're being very critical in their look at it, and in a good way, making sure they're leaving no stone uncovered. So our plan at this point is to try to bring the group together in early November to talk about whether or not we're in a position to prepare and forward a recommendation to the curriculum committee for a resource adoption.
So Pam, when I read this at first, I thought when we had the vendor one and we had 3 meetings, that possibly it was vendor presentations, but that's not true.
It is.
Oh, it is.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a vendor presentation then for an hour and 15 minutes, how are you digging into the information that they provided afterwards to see if it aligns with what we're looking for as a curriculum?
2 ways. We have the resources. We have sample resources so people can dig into the resources. We also recorded every vendor presentation so that that people could go back and review as they're digging in. We have access to some online resources that accompany the resources, the package, I guess, that our folks have been digging into as well. And Jen has been taking questions from the team and forwarding them back and forth to the vendor, also to some folks who we know that are implementing a few of these things that we've been able to reach out to and ask some questions.
Is there a time now I know you said you're going to be probably getting together in November,
Mhm.
where as a group that you would almost have the same analysis that you did over Lucy Hopkins, where you've kind of separated out what strengths and weaknesses the programs that you're looking at have, or what kind of analysis are you going to give it, I guess, after the vendor presentation?
Each grade band has a checklist. It's a very thorough rubric where it takes each indicator and says, here's what we're looking for. How well does this resource meet it? And so folks have been going through line by line. There are multiple pages, so it's pretty lengthy, going through and making notes on that. And then we have asked them to complete a survey where they're going to look at each of those indicators and say, when we look at the resources, is there one that's better at meeting that component than the other, or are they both very similar? Eventually, we're asking folks, do you have a recommendation? Would you make it? So we're asking people to try to make a final decision. We will pull all of that together and as a team make a decision of, do we have something that's clear cut, or do we need to have further conversations? So that's why I say early November, the team will come together as whole again, and hopefully, but I don't know. It depends on what the team is uncovering as they're going through this process.
And either way, we're saying we need to be done with Lucy, right?
Yes.
We're all in agreement with that. Okay. Thank you.
So the timeline is, as I indicated, is just continuing. We're in the process, so we wanted you to have that. We do have some targets there for hopefully bringing things to the curriculum committee sometime in that November timeframe. But again, that's dependent on whether or not the team can come to a consensus on what we want to move forward.
So just taking a look then, we utilized some of the data that we got from the surveys, ed reports, which we'll talk a little bit more about ed reports, and then the strong feedback supporting the workshop model. When we did the survey, we heard back from staff that even if Lucy Hopkins is not the way and the units of study are not the way that we want to continue forward, the workshop model is something that they feel strongly about keeping. So with those three factors in mind, we did some homework to start narrowing down, because there are a lot of ELA options, narrowing down to what we wanted to take a look at. The resources in consideration for K-5 is, you can see, are Wonders, which is a 2023 publication, and Into Reading, which is 2020. And then 468 is Study Sync, which is McGraw-Hill has Wonders and Study Sync. So those two programs transition nicely together. And then Into Reading and Into Literature would be the 6 to 8. And that was the publication of 2022.
And when Jen references the workshop model, basically it's called the gradual release of responsibility model, where teachers do a mini lesson on a key target concept or skill. And then there's time for some guided practice with the students, and then they move into independent practice or group practice, collaborative practice, while the teacher then is able to spend some time working with students in small groups or individually to build some skills, set some goals and build some skills. So it's got a overall flow to it that allows for a mix of whole group instruction with also some smaller group instruction and students either independently working to practice skills or working together as a collaborative team to practice skills.
So what you're saying is the models that you're picking here, or that you've got before us anyway, practice the workshop model.
They will fit into the workshop model, that they allow for that kind of flow of instruction.
So then we'll dig a little bit more again into ed reports. Like I said, that is something that we've utilized a lot throughout this process. American School Board Journal and DPI lists ed reports as the primary tool to utilize in researching instructional materials and going through that selection process. So we definitely utilized that. And the following video just gives a very brief overview of the process that they use to evaluate those instructional materials. I just tried it right before we started. Yeah.
Your college
Fine,
keep
fine.
on. One of my least favorite things about writing papers in college was remembering the letter format for my citations.
Oh,
In
not
high
all
school,
looked up.
I used Emily format, but in college, I was expected to.
Oh, is that from your computer? I was gonna
It
say,
is.
where's that sound coming from?
Sorry.
Okay. Well, you should have access to that in the materials that were provided to you. It's a very, very short video, just saying it's for educators by educators. It's an independent rating process, and just kind of how the members of the Ed Reports team go through a training to kind of norm the way that they are scoring and evaluating different materials. So you'll be able to access that on your own.
I
Sorry
didn't know
about
that was a video before.
So as we get into the two resources, we just wanted to talk a little bit about where Ed Reports put them so that you have that information at your fingertips. So when Ed Reports looks at resources, they look at three different pillars, they call them. The three pillars are text quality and complexity, building knowledge, and usability. And so Wonders and InterReading are meeting expectations on all of those fronts, and you can see that's across grade levels. So just wanted you to have that information at the ready so that you kind of knew where the selection of the resources was drawn from.
And there are some districts that have gone the direction of needing any instructional materials that are brought forth to be green on Ed Reports. That's something that some districts have put as a necessity. So we wanted to go along and kind of look through that same lens of text quality, complexity, like Pam was talking about there. Just knowing that some districts really do value that in the process.
Then taking a look at, there we go. Just wanting to let you see in terms of the amount of time for Wonders within the schedule. So 120 minutes at K2 and then 90 minutes or 120 minutes at 3.5. The reason typically for the additional minutes at the K2 level is because of that phonics instruction. So both will do reading and writing, all grade bands, but K2 typically adds a little extra time for that foundational skill or phonics piece. And so that's just to let you know that that's the amount of time a Wonders would engage. And then this reflects the 6th through 8th grade, and again, meets expectations, and that is for StudySync, which is the is a comparable curriculum resource to Wonders, just moving it into the 6-8 level. For the 6-8 group, they follow a similar model in terms of the workshop model. And so this just kind of gives you an overview of the minutes that they suggest in terms of a typical, what they will call first read lesson. They do multiple reads of literature oftentimes. And so when you get into those second reads and beyond, there may be a little bit differentiation in terms of the amount of minutes, but a typical introductory lesson, this would be what they would recommend. This just gives you some information about where is Wonders currently in our area being utilized. And so you can see some school districts. We are seeing across all of our resource review that many districts are moving away from Lucy Calkins and looking for something different, which is not a surprise to us. And so we know we're right in track with other districts. And then you have some information there in taking a look at the costs that we're anticipating. Did get a quote from the vendor in terms of Wonders and StudySync. What would that look like for a 6-year contract? And we did at this time include all of the elementary, both middle schools and McKinley Virtual Academy, and that was just because we got the quote prior to some of the conversations that have been on the more recent horizons.
And what is the estimate? You have one-
$725,000 for 6 years.
Oh, because it's not on our property. Oh, like the 725 is missing and ends with the word approximately. So I was wondering about that. Thank you.
We'll make sure you get the updated
Okay,
with the
thanks.
on there.
And then taking a look at Houghton Mifflin resources, again, that's into reading K-5 and into literature 6-8. We've got those ed reports. Again, this is K2 on the ed reports, meeting all of those expectations. This is the breakdown for minutes suggested at into reading. You can see that there's a 90-minute option and a 120-minute option. There's no question that, as Pam mentioned, for that K2, we would do the 120 minutes and then have the option for 3-5 to either do a 90-minute ELA block or a 120-minute ELA block, just depending how it fits best into the schedules. But we know that we would utilize all of that time when it comes to K2, where they have that additional work in foundational skills and phonics. And the 3-5 ed reports. And then this is the breakdown for into literature. This, again, the 6-8 programming. You can see that they estimate the 50-minute classes, which is more, they have more than that at 6th grade and 45 minutes at 7 and 8. So there would have to be slight alteration to get to the 45 minutes, but you can see that it's very close to what one session of ELA is right now in our middle school model. You can see that they have a day to get ready. They're introduced to the content. They have 3 days to really do a deep dig into the content and have some scaffolded and differentiated materials to be able to work through that. And then they have 2 days to respond to what they read. So that's where they have the opportunity to do some writing, some discourse, some speaking and listening practice. And there's the ad reports again for that 6-8. It's green in all areas. We shared that into reading and into literature facts. Again, you can see Milwaukee Public Schools, Racine, Hilbert, Sheboygan area schools. A lot of very familiar names. We've actually partnered with Kewanee for some reading experiences in the past where we've gone and observed Kewanee. So they are doing into literature. So just some neighboring units that we would be able to partner with and tap on their shoulders to say, how did this work? And maybe even be able to see the product in action. Again, 2,100 districts across the country right now, and a lot more people looking into it, like Pam said, as they move away from the units of study. And that quote, again, for all buildings, 6 elementary schools, 2 middle schools in McKinley is approximately $760,000. Again, that's for 6 years. That includes all consumable materials that you would need for the 6-year contract.
And then just bringing us back to, as we continue in this process, I mentioned before, we will get to a decision-making point, and that's where we're kind of looking to go next. The ELA team members will get that survey from us on those 2 curricular options, take all of their notes and make good decisions based upon the notes from their digging in. And then we will bring them together on November 7th to start the conversation about, are we in a position to put together a recommendation for the board? And if at that point the team does get to that point where they are ready to do that, then we are going to use that textbook resource adoption form to capture all of the information into a document to share with everybody. So
One of the questions that I have too is we haven't talked anything about, there has been no mention of staff development with any of the programs. And so one of the things that I want to see personally is that whatever recommendation you come forward with, that we have a true commitment from the vendor on staff development, because it doesn't do any good when we buy a program and things fall away and we have it for years and nothing's happening from the company. So I think that, we need to be provided some of those resources and know what those are before we would enter into a contract with anyone. That's one of the things I'd be interested in seeing.
And that's a part of that resource adoption form. Again, today was just to bring everybody up to
Right.
speed where we're at in the process. We have talked, Jen and myself and our team have talked about what could professional development look like, not only from the vendor, but what other things might we need to think about as we get people prepared to understand any shifts in the way we're thinking about literacy instruction. And so we've been talking and working through getting some preliminary ideas down for that. Some of it depends again on when we get that consensus from the team, then we'll be in a better position to really formalize things.
And the quotes that we did have are inclusive of your overview from the vendor and a couple additional sessions. So that is included in the quotes at this point, though they always give you the option to add more or additional coaching if you want to. But that is like the overview of the program, understanding the components for our teachers was included in those quotes for both programs.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Two concerns that I have are the direction that our surveys are kind of pointed towards. I listened very intensely. I didn't hear one aspect about the results that we've had already with Lucy Calkins and what we've been using in the past. And that concerns me that we wouldn't be asking our teachers what's working actually and what's not as a result of their scores or of their learning. So the survey questions are concerning. I think Tony brought that up to as well. And I would ask that we would try to, kind of narrow in with our surveying of our teachers, how we can be more results oriented to what the children are actually reading at that particular age level. So I want our children to be heard, understanding that they know that there's a reading level that they're achieving, and I don't see that with these questions.
Just for clarification, the survey did ask for teachers to do that. So the survey questions were, here's a component, please rate this on the level of importance to an ELA curriculum resource. And then please tell us how well our current resource is doing in that. But every opportunity to do that included an opportunity for comments. And then as Jen indicated, there was an opportunity to identify, summarize, what are the strengths of our current resource and what do you see as our needs for our resource? So all of that data was gathered. We didn't have all of that in that analysis because again, that was just a precipitating factor to say, are we comfortable with continuing Lucy Calkins or do we need to look at something different? The evidence was clear. We got to do something
the
different.
consensus is clear that we need to do something
Right.
in the right direction of our students'
Right.
achievement.
So that's why it may be a little bit unclear from the results that you were shared, but the survey did ask for all of that feedback.
Yep, thank you.
It was clear from the staff. We need to look.
I'm curious, guys, it looks like both of these are relatively new. I think Wonders has been around for a while, right? But we're looking at a newer edition of it, and the other one looks like from 2020. And it sounds like there's other districts nearby that are using it. Do we have any evidence, knowing that our district, has a unique demographic, right? We've talked about that before. Have we seen evidence of either of these programs actually being implemented and improving results in districts that have comparable demographics to ours and similar challenges that we have?
We have not dug completely into that. The research from Ed Reports would indicate that they have some effectiveness. That's part of that process. And then also the follow-up research that they have, very similar to other vendors would do the same thing, is to put out published research about their effectiveness. And so that's a component of that process, but the process we're going through is just digging into looking at our own students, our own staff. What do we believe is beneficial about a resource? Where is a gap in the resource? That's what we're doing right now.
And I think that's great, and I would encourage you to continue to collect that feedback from our staff. But I also think as part of the due diligence as we go through this process, I'd like to see evidence that this has been implemented successfully before in a district that has similar challenges to ours. And I'm guessing it may have, but I don't know that. I've seen some. It sounds like there's been some districts in North Carolina, but I don't know what those districts look like, compared to ours. And I know that's, there are some challenges here, right, that we've talked about in the past. And I just want to make sure that whatever direction we go, we're going to look at an evidence-based model. And I think the more evidence we have, especially if it's, I guess another way to think about it is I'd rather not be the guinea pig, right? If there's one that has been proven to work in a diverse population like ours, then that's the one I think would present less risk.
And I feel like we were updating on the team tonight, but as there is a recommendation, we will be able to dig in. When we know what the one recommendation would be, we'd be able to dig into a deeper degree to be able to provide more of that information and say, okay, if it is interreading, what does interreading look like in different districts? If it is wonders, what does that look like in different districts once that recommendation has been made by the team?
Right, and I would even encourage you guys to include that on the front end, right? I mean, I think that would be worthwhile as you guys are, it sounds like it's just two of them, right? Unless there's more that I missed, but I would, I would think that would be certainly something to look into.
Do we have any questions? Thanks for all your time and effort bringing us up to speed, guys. We really appreciate that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to transition to standards-based learning. Our honorary member of the curriculum committee, Lee Pettis, is here. And he's brought a team of folks that worked hard to put together a presentation around standards-based learning, and I'll let Lee and the team introduce themselves. So thank you for being here.
Hi. Good evening. Thanks so much for inviting us to present to the committee. We have a brief presentation on standards-based learning. I brought some shipbuilders with me, and I'd like to just give them a second for everybody to sort of introduce themselves. So we'll start on this side.
I'm Chris Conrad. I've been teaching in the district for 18 years, math, and I've taught 7, 8 algebra, geometry strategies, and geometry strategies.
I'm Melanie Shimmick. I've been teaching in the district for 5 years. I actually came from industry prior to teaching. I teach computer science and business. My background is my master's is in business and technology, small business owner as well. So I gain a lot of industry experience that I can share with you guys.
Dana Bottle, e-teacher, Lincoln High School. Been here 23 years, taught all levels.
Hi, I'm Mary Doran. I'm a special ed teacher across categorical. This is my 4th year in the district. I did not come from an education background. My degree is in journalism. And I did a lot of different jobs before I came to education. So I get to bring that.
Hi, I'm Mary Lusk. I am an ELA/speech and communication teacher at Lincoln High School. I have been teaching for 24 and a half years, taught in 4 different districts. So I have a wealth of knowledge of different processes in different districts. And this is my 5th year in Antoine.
What do you teach?
I teach ELA, English and speech.
Good evening.
My name's Chantel Williams. I have been in Manitowoc Public Schools for 4 years.
Yes.
And Manitowoc actually started with Dakota, so I was in Dakota before that, where I received specific training in data-driven instruction and standards-based learning. Before that, I was in Lake Geneva, and I'm actually a graduate of BW Oshkosh and the Institute of Urban Education in Vaughan.
My name is Rebecca Nightheist. I teach instrumental music at the high school, but this is my 19th year of teaching. I've taught anywhere from 6th grade through 12th grade instrumental music. I also have a master's in special education. And I've been working with standards-based learning for probably about the last 12 years. And this is my 6th year in the district.
So again, thanks for having us. Our goal for this presentation, I'm gonna shut up and let the experts in the classroom do most of the talking, but we want to really for sure provide a nice overview, a general overview of standards-based learning, particularly at Lincoln High School. We want to provide you with some examples of what this looks like in the classroom. And then we want to give you an opportunity to ask us any questions. Just a visual that we've used, we put these on little cards as we were implementing standards-based learning. That standards-based learning aligns focused instruction with grading practices that provide our students with clear communication on what they understand and are able to do, and gives teachers the information they need to address any gaps in learning. So I think what you're going to hear over and over in this presentation is that standards-based learning allows us to do two very important instructional high leverage practices very well. Number one, it allows us to be insanely clear with kids around what they need to know and be able to do in our classes. And then the second one is really providing them with the feedback that they need around that learning in order to reach the next levels of achievement in their learning. And as you see below, we have these essential pillars, which basically are things that exist in our learning community that we have connected to standards-based learning. I'll turn it over to Ms. Shin.
All right. So why did we adopt standards-based learning? I like to think of standards-based learning and change like the mindset or the verbiage of it a little bit and think of it as competency-based learning. We are trying to achieve competency, right? As business owners, right? Or as teachers or as individuals, everything we do in life, we want to be competent. Standard-based learning allows us to do that and produce learners that have those skills, like if they're going into the workforce, whether it's trades, a business, anything they do. We actually use standards-based learning every day in our lives. We just don't always see it, right? Whether you're on the football field, right? Every single day you're practicing to get better. You're practicing to get better. And what is your ultimate goal or the ultimate standard there, right? To achieve high level, right? So you practice, you get better, you have more opportunities to do so. Again, we wanted a system like Mr. Tennis had stated that provides our students with high quality feedback. Lets them know where they are in their learning and where they need to go. So they should understand what it is they're learning. We also wanted a system of learning that requires students to take ownership of their learning by providing evidence of their competency. So I took the opportunity to pull a couple of state standards. The state standards that I'm going to read to you, let's hypothetically say we are sitting in a construction trades class at Lincoln High School. Okay, so you guys walk in, it's the first day. Okay, so first day of learning, your teacher's like, I'm Ms. Shimmick, I'm teaching construction. That probably wouldn't happen, but I do want to point out how clear and concise these are and what these students should be learning. So some of the state standards for a construction trades class. Implement personal and job site safety rules and regulations to maintain and improve safe and healthy working conditions and environments. Demonstrate the safe and appropriate use of tools. Okay, I hope they're confident in that, right? Analyze construction requirements, materials, structures, techniques, and maintenance. Demonstrate the various building phases, systems, and techniques used in construction. Calculate the financial impact of a project with the societal and labor trends, and adopt new technological tools to increase personal and organizational productivity. So me knowing anything specifically about the construction trades, looking at those standards, I know what my expectations are of that class, right? And like those of us that are in the business world, let's say we're going to open an MPSD construction company, right? MPSD construction company comes to, say, our youth apprentice coordinator, and they're like, we need somebody that is great in the construction trades. Who do you have for me? they are able to, or we are actually able to give feedback to them about where each individual lies within those standards, right? So like, there might not be, the individual themselves might not be great at calculating the financial impact, but they have demonstrated that they can analyze their construction requirements. They are able to work safely, all of those different things. And we are able to show competency in all of those different levels versus just, hey, they took a test, they passed the class, right? So we keep practicing those requirements until they're considered competent.
Speak. All right. I'm Dana Ball. I'm a PE teacher at Lincoln. What does it look like in your class? First of all, we spent a lot of our time in our PLCs developing which are our priority standards. Okay, like we have a lot of standards. FIAD doesn't have near as many as math and English, but we all sat down and said, which ones are the God knows, like you graduate Lincoln High School, these are the things you absolutely have to understand. Okay, we chose our priority standards. We made learning targets, clear God knows with that. And then I brought an example what I use in class. This chart hangs in the weight room. Like you enter a strength training class. It's not the old gym class you had when we all went to school where you showed up, you changed, you played a sport, and you left. Like I honestly, as a FIAD teacher, I couldn't tell you what we had to learn or any standards when I was in school. It says right on this chart, and I refer to this chart actually daily. All right. Like today I walked up to my class and said, all right, we're talking health enhancing fitness right now. Before you leave this gym, where did your workout go? Were you a 1? 1 means, yeah, I kind of sat there and went through the motions. Versus a 4, I had enough physical activity to positively impact my own health. And we do little checks like that every day. We do put them in student-friendly language because, no offense, you look at the state standards, they're very wordy for lawyers and such. So health enhancing fitness, fit principle, nutrition, character skills, and growth mindset. Those are words that our kids actually reference. Like jokingly, I'll have kids in class, you're not working hard, you don't have a great growth mindset today. Or they'll be, kids pick on each other and they joke around. Your character skills is a 1 today. Or if you say something positive, hey, that's a 4. So they're even starting to talk in this language, which I think is outstanding because they're noticing where they are in their growth levels. And I have a lot of kids that start in 1s and 2s. Beginning of the year, like parent teacher conferences last week. Oh man, I got a C in class. I got a 2. I said, that's all right. That's where you are right now. I'm looking for where you are at the end of the semester in those 3s and 4s. And that's that growth that you develop. And you can tell where you're at. You can come over to the chart and say, hey, I was here and I've slowly, progressively moved up through the semester. And by the end of the semester, hopefully you're into that 3 and 4 range. So that's how it looks in at least the electives world. A little different than probably the core classes that have different sets of standards. Questions?
No, you just said it. I think the electives will works out really well in that aspect. I agree 100%. That's all I have to say.
Well, we're not done yet, so we might have more to say there.
So I did not get a chance to some of the things that we wanted to hand out right away. Would you mind if I
Go ahead.
Packets?
Let me get the help. Maybe the form on side. Want us to hand out everything or? Okay, let's do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Chantel and I'm Mary Lossett, Chantel Williams. We're gonna go through our PLC process. Tully and I, we've worked together for 3 years on a PLC with Emily Matson too. So we just wanted to share some of the items that we have done together. Chantel just handed out some data packets on what we do in our PLC. And I only made 3 packets because I wasn't sure how much to make. And then I also have just some examples of rubrics. So if you want to just pass those around.
And we have some examples of or an example of what we have seen when we were younger in comparison to what we are moving towards as a model. And that workshop model that was referenced earlier today in my meeting.
You want to start with the data since? Yeah, you're the data queen.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
So we have to, do you mind if I stand a little bit more comfortable? Thank you. Okay, so we as teachers have to have time to document how our students are growing and interpret that information. And we do so together in PLC. So this is an integral part of our standard-based learning program that we moving towards, because we have to know what does it mean if a student is at a 2, and does a 2 look differently in different ways for students. So Johnny might be at a 2 because he is not developing his analysis, and Susie might be at a 2 because she has not fully identified all of the language terms or the language uses and how that is changing or affecting the meaning of the information that we interpret. So like we have to kind of figure out what that means to us, and we have to also figure out what's the best way to help our students grow. So the PLC model is actually really important to the standards-based learning. At Kakana, I was a part of 2 PLCs. I was part of a behavioral PLC, meeting the needs of the students at where the students need them. And I also was a part of the learning PLC. So this is something that we do and actually are a part of the PLC together. Now, I want to give you guys examples of some data or what data might look like, or that PLCs will go through and interpret to figure out how to support students best and how to help them grow to meet these expectations or exceed expectations that are set by these standards. Right? So the first one is going to be a more electronic copy. This is called something called the Google spreadsheet gradebook. And what it does is it graphs where our students are in terms of where every other student is in our class. And it helps us determine those deficits. The color coding was me. I like the organization. And then the second one is going to be a more formative approach here that we have, that we use within our classroom. This is something that Kakana has taught me that I have brought over to Lincoln. They might look like hieroglyphics to you, but each one of these symbols represents where a student is in that learning process. Something that is on a lot of people's mind in our district right now is, well, this literacy part, how do we bring up this literacy? We can't forget that literacy is a multitude of different skills. It's not just reading. Okay, there's a lot that goes into literacy. So if you can see, there's a lot here that goes into literacy. So as we walk around the room or in reflection observation modes, I will mark where I think these students are, and then I will go to students one-on-one and I'll ask them to take supports, and I will give them personal one-on-one instruction to do that, right? So this right here stems from that PLC model. It is a part of that PLC model, and we are really identifying all of those places that we need to grow as teachers and that our students need to grow in, and we're figuring out how to help them do that.
So the one color-coded one that I had, that was an example of how we bring our common formative assessment data to our PLC. So we each have a spreadsheet that just is mine right now. And we talk about, okay, are the kids able to analyze literary devices and text? And where are our kids and what are the strategies we're using? And then based off of that data, we develop our interventions within the classroom and then also pulling them in during win times to make sure that they're getting to where they need to go.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. That's the best here. So what you are seeing before you is an example of a rubric. Rubrics can be made in different ways to meet the different needs of the standards of the students. Is a rubric that is standard-based. What I want and what we want for the board to do is consider the perspective. This is very different than what we all grew up with is this like structure, the workshop model, and the language presented within this rubric. Now, if you can open up your pages to, I have a lot of pages going on, to this page here, where you have the long way down essay, you're going to see a bunch of points listed on that long way down essay. You're going to see this rubric that says how we are grading students. This is what you are probably used to. This is probably what you saw in school. This is what I know.
This was like in my class.
Right? This is what I saw when I was schooling. To be honest, I wasn't actually sure what I was doing. I just figured I was doing something right.
This is actually like probably how I developed essay assignments back early in my career as well.
So if I were to look at my students and say, okay, well, there's going to be 10 points on evidence. Make sure you have evidence in your essay. Well, evidence, paraphrased evidence. It can be textual evidence. It needs to be sufficient. It needs to be relevant. What is Mrs. Williams looking at, and what is the skill that I need to grow on specifically? This does not give that. Okay. So if you flip over to the next page, we have here specific standards that lay out those skills that we can use and not only feedback to the students to specifically say, this is where you need to grow, and this is the standing to go, or the skill that you need to grow in. All right. And not only does do that, we also define what those skills are on the side, and we will put some student-friendly language that Dana Bongo had referenced in here so the students know what they truly need to grow on. And then my students in my class, I know Ms. Lex class and a lot of our classes, not only see these rubrics, but they also evaluate themselves on these rubrics as a term of reflection. And we know that reflection is incredibly necessary to growth, whether that be personal or educational.
And those were a couple of the packets that you'll see. I had some book club discussion reflections. My students just did their first book club discussion, so they reflected on that in class yesterday. And then some speech and when we do fishbowl discussions as well, when they're in the middle of the classroom and then the rest of the students are observing. And then also we do peer feedback.
And specifically, we do go over what is proficient, and I know that we, in my classes, we do go over, okay, what would be advanced? And we go over that modeling as we use that GRR instruction to show, well, this is how I would do it. These are the sense and stems if you need that help and that support. Now I want to see you guys do this together, or now I want to see you try it on your own, and I'm going to give you feedback on that. But bringing it back to this, look how specific it is. And like, think about how much ownership of your learning you would have had if you had this specific language. So how does this differ from when you were a student in school? And what could you have done if you would have known what evidence meant or what introduction meant? As you can see that I have some speaking little skills of myself, and that came from personal reflection and knowing exactly what I needed to do, not an 82% on an essay.
So good. My colleagues are brilliant, and everything that they say is what I would say. So working in special education, standards-based learning is very specific and clear. And that is fantastic, not only for my students, but for me, so that I can really pinpoint like where those gaps are, or what skills that we're still needing a little bit of growth on. And with a rubric, then we can like pinpoint, like, okay, well, yeah, you've got some of a 2, maybe some of a 3. And it can really just narrow in then where we need to work, where we're gonna meet that student, and where they're gonna go. Also, I wanted to piggyback off of what Melanie said. I mean, it's not this, right? We want students who are going to go out into the world and be open-minded and, you know, critical thinkers, problem solvers. And I think this, in a way, keeps the bar high for all students, because I want all of my kids after high school, whether they go to further their education or out in the work field. I want them to be able to know what is expected of them. If they don't know, how they can find out. It's more clear, specific. I understand what is asked of them. The students know what is asked of them. Even in my interventions with students, again, they self-monitor themselves and their goals. They are self-assessing themselves. Being honest. I'm a 2 or 3. Okay, what do you think you need to do to get to like a full 3? And you talk about it. How else are they going to know what they need to do if we don't tell them in a clear, specific way?
Okay, I think I would like to start with a comment that you made about it works well in electives, and I can definitely see that where you're
Specialized one.
and where you're coming from for sure. Because oftentimes I would think, like, as a musician, I have given students feedback all the time. Before standards-based grading, it has been something that I've done forever. What I will say is I think a major difference is before in my in-services, I would have a principal say to me, everybody needs to incorporate reading into their class. Everybody needs to do it. Or everybody needs to incorporate writing into their class. And then as a band teacher, I would say, okay, what am I going to have them do? Write a paper about a composer or do that. However, now with the standards that we have laid out that we're using specifically in music, it does tie in some of the English standards. It does tie in some of our standards that we're seeing in other subject areas as a lot more cross-categorical, which I think is fantastic because now I can look at and say, we are doing in music and this is how it is reading, and this is how it supports what's going on in ELA. Like, for example, one of our huge initiatives district-wide is argumentation this year, right? And, we want students to be able to have evidence to support their learning and evidence to back up the claims that they're saying. So whether or not we agree with them or we don't agree with them, they need to have a reason, and it's not just because I think so. One example. Yeah.
So you're saying that a 1 through 4, you tie the standards that you're trying to achieve, and then you can point to that standard if that student's achieving a 1 because they are starting to use literacy in their music lessons. So that's what you're saying, use that to tie, and then you just create the rubric figure as the number goes up, right?
Sort of. What I'm saying is the standards that we now have in music education are they are tied in with some of the English standards already.
I'm saying for your 1 through 4 grading scale.
Yep.
How does that happen? And I'm trying to give you like a handoff here, saying to you on number 1 for a 4, are you articulating in the rubric all the things that they are achieving in the 4 on your standard? Because now you can articulate more than just a letter grade. You're saying they are achieving A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and all these things, and you're saying that works really well.
Yes, yeah, for sure. And one of our standards is evaluate and refine. And that definitely ties into what's going on the literacy side. So I'll just give an example. Every student I want to be prepared for the concert. And typically in the past, and this is how it was done for me as well as a student, and I started grading in my early teaching career because the way I was graded, because they don't really tell you how to do that in college at all, which was I would be ready to play for a concert and somebody would say, yep, you've played the notes right. Yep, you've played the rhythms right. Yep, you've done this right. You've done this right. And it was a checkbox kind of system. But if I didn't do it right, all I knew is I screwed up on my notes. Now I got a 75%. Or in my case, I was a person that maybe that was a little bit above, and I would have a 97%. My first question would be, how can I get 100%? Well, you can do this extra credit, which may have had nothing or absolutely nothing to do with what I was actually going for and increasing my learning on my instrument to be better for the concert. But maybe I did a music word search. Maybe I brought in a box of Kleenexes. So I got my 100% because that was what I was really concerned about. Definitely an A-driven student. Not all of our students we know are like that. Whereas right now, what I'm doing with students, for an example, that will tie right into some of the English standards that are going on. Students are I give them music. I know you can't see this. I'm just showing you that there's a computer system working through Google Classroom. I hand them a brand new piece of music. And they take like a pre-assessment on music. They select measures. We have measures selected that are going to challenge them and be difficult for them. They're going to play through those measures and then they do a self-evaluation on there. So for example, the student said, something I did well was hitting most of the notes in the runs, especially the F sharps. What I definitely need to work on is counting the rest between the runs correctly and being able to play the runs quicker and more smoothly. So when been talking to the students about their own self-evaluation, I'm saying, you can tell me what you did wrong. I played notes wrong. I can do better on rests, but you need to support a little bit of evidence with that. So she specifically targeted out that the F sharps were an issue, knowing full well that would be something very easily missed. She's saying she needs to work on the rests in between the runs quickly to make them more quickly and smoothly. And that's taking her context clues around her saying, okay, I know what the tempo said, which is the speed of the music. I know that it needs to be smooth because of articulations, which is telling you in the music how to play it. And then she gave me her example. What I'll do from that is I give her feedback. So I'll tell her, yes, you're on track. No, you're not on track. Or have you also maybe thought about this? This is what you could add. And that's going to go right along with standards cross-categorical within the classroom as well. We do that in the middle, and then we'll do that again right before the concert. And then we have a discussion over what does the growth look like? What did you learn? What are you still lacking? And again, that ties straight to the 4-point rubric. That's going to be very different for a student who plays their final assessment, and I would maybe get them an 80%. That would tell them they have 80% of the music. 80% of what? Rests, notes, rhythms. 80% of, it doesn't give them a whole picture. But whether I can say, well, you have a 3 in this area, a 4 in this area, 3 in this area, they know exactly the skills that they're lacking. Another thing I wanted to point out is before I came here, I worked at Lewisburg School District where we had done standards-based grading. This, like I said, this is like my 12th year that I've been doing standards-based grading. I was so used to working in that standards model, and I will tell you, in that district, they just said the day before in-service started, we're switching. No training, nothing. We were thrown in the fire. Parents were in an uproar. Students were in uproar. Teachers were in uproar because we didn't know how this model worked. And we really grew. It was a painful growing process. But I will tell you, by year 3, nobody talked about percentages anymore. As soon as those kids who were sophomores, freshmen, graduated, everybody was using the same language, K-12. And I felt really comfortable in every single one of my classes teaching standards-based and referring to letter grades or score the number where you were at. I will tell you that kids did not have as much anxiety over their testing because they were always aware of where they were. There wasn't a, I hope I study, and this was any classroom. I study in chemistry. No, they already knew what they were going to be getting before they even took the final assessment because they had been documenting and they know where they were in the standards the entire time. When I came here to Manitowoc in the beginning, one of the very first things I said to Lee was, I don't know how to grade this way. You're going to have to help me out here. I do 4 through 2-1. I can't convert that back just percentages. Tell me how you did that. And he was like, I had many discussions with him, many which were frustrated because I didn't know how to shift it back. I will tell you, I had to lower my standards for percentages. And it took me a while to get my kids in that mindset. I had kids asking me first quarter, I'm not getting an A in band. What's that about? Well, you didn't earn an A. Were you prepared? Where are you in terms of your learning? Can't I just like play off some scales or something and get some extra points? Well, that doesn't actually show me that you learned what you were supposed to learn. Scales aren't going to do anything at this point for this level. So I was really excited and happy to see that we're moving this way just because I have been part of the district that went from low to mid test scores up to number 3 test scores in the state. And I can tell you that it was definitely because they had this shift in mindset. So when Manitowoc started moving towards this, it was kind of like I felt right at home and I felt so much more comfortable than manipulating it the other way to the percentages.
So are you suggesting that the shift to standards-based learning caused them to jump that high in scores?
I would say there was a huge correlation because students always knew where they were. And I would say it served It serves students who think they know everything already, and we push them harder, because the learning doesn't stop. And it makes us as teachers accountable for that as well. And I would say on the low end, you know, we would say you have this many students earning an F, and a lot of it was because they just wanted, I don't care, I'll take the F. I don't feel like putting in the work. I would say we can't, we don't, we won't let students say no to that. If they're not performing well, we're gonna do every single thing it takes. And you know, I think that is a shift in mindset too, because before we might say, well, that kid clearly doesn't care. I've done this, and they don't care. Right now, we're pulling them in for intervention. Right now, we're taking a look constantly in our PLCs at data saying, these 5 kids aren't meeting benchmark. Everything I'm doing is not working. What are you doing? How come you don't have 5 kids in that same area? And we can collaborate together. I would say 100% it has a direct correlation.
If I may add to Rebecca's point, I think that it's important to note that standard-based learning supports cross-curricular application of skill. As an English teacher, I don't teach a book. I do not teach a book. I teach skills, and we use the book as like means to learn those skills. Right? We use them for modeling, and we use them for practice, and we also use them for assessment, right? But it is not this, I'm not teaching or asking my students to tell me what the characters are, what the characters are wearing. What I am asking them to do is tell me how that language and that text, how that affects what they understand.
So what we're asking them to do is higher depth of knowledge. So the depth of knowledge is kind of on a scale of 1 to 4. 1 is like a recall where it's just very basic. We're asking them to analyze and create and synthesize, and that's getting higher up in the depth of knowledge.
So to add on to Rebecca here, which I think is really cool, I have students who come in after I teach rhetoric, and they come in and they start, as we are going over speech, they're going over parallel structure and all these rhetorical devices and strategies to be able to explain and change something to make it in their favor, or to know when somebody is trying to impact what you understand and what you feel. And they are using the rhythm that they learn and how to pace themselves that they learned in Rebecca's class. And they are using it in the rhetoric that I'm teaching and in their practice learning. So it truly does support, like, they don't just go into Rebecca's class and say, oh, I'm just learning music today. They're learning these skills, and the skills are showing up everywhere, and it's a really strong connection in those classes.
Yeah, I think this is a good, you guys have highlighted so many of the points that I was gonna make too. Our last slide addresses the question, does standards-based learning lower or raise the bar on learning? And it definitely took some understanding of how this was going to work, and hearing, Rebecca, that, you know, you were told the day before, like during in-service, I could not imagine that, because this has been a process that the district has given lots of PD time to, and made sure that we understood the process and the why behind it. And it wasn't that all classes, all teachers had to be ready to grade this way by this date. Because not everybody was ready at the same time, just like not all kids are, you know, have learned a certain thing at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday when you decide to give the test. So I very much appreciated that we felt supported. There was just constant check-ins from, you know, administration asking us how we felt about where we were at, what questions did we have, what did they need to support us. I mean, that was, it just sounds very much the opposite of what you experienced. As far as, you know, are we raising or lowering the bar? And I would completely, like, your question was a good one. Are we raising or lowering, for sure raising the bar. Grades should reflect learning, and some of the things that examples you gave Rebecca about, you know, getting, maybe if your parent comes to parent teacher conferences, you get extra credit. Like I remember when I first started teaching, that was encouraged to give kids extra credit if their parents came, because we, like the purpose, like I got the, you know, purpose was to try to get parents there so we could communicate with them about how their students were doing in class. But, and you also think about all of the reasons why that wasn't fair to all students, because they obviously couldn't control that. But that had nothing to do with their learning, you know, getting an extra 10 points or doing a geometry vocabulary word search, or even if you turn something in on Tuesday versus Monday, if what was turned in on Tuesday was phenomenal, should that grade, you know, be lowered? I think back to when I first started teaching, and it was just common that every day you turn things in late, points were deducted, and you got to a point where it no longer paid to do it. And kids would say that, and how do you counteract that, you know? And so then I started thinking about, I guess we did so many things because it was the way it had always been done, and it didn't make sense, and you didn't feel good about explaining it to kids. And so now the grades do reflect learning, and if they, you know, had inflated grades that weren't reflective of learning, that, or tied to standards just to get an A, you know, that isn't the point. I think standards-based learning raises the bar for students to take ownership, which was something that Telly brought up too. It takes the subjectivity out of grading through the use of detailed rubrics that communicate to students what they need to be able to know and do. That's a big thing we spend time on in our PLCs, is talking about what the rubrics are going to look like when we give assessments. Because if we both are teaching a geometry class, but a 4, you can do it, a 4 in Melanie's class is going to look different than a 4 in my class. That's not fair to students. Not only are we creating common formative assessments, which are assessments that are for feedback for the students and feedback for us, we're creating summative assessments, which come after more learning and practice has occurred. But we're trying to eliminate the subjectivity of, you know, like the compliant, happy, you know, raises their hand a lot student that never turns anything in late might naturally get a better grade. And somebody that turns in great work, but it might always be a day late, should they have a lower grade when their learning is at a higher level? Like, certainly we want to teach students responsibility, and that there's not a teacher in the building that would say that, you know, we're getting rid of, you know, teaching those kinds of character traits. But rubrics show students what they need to do to be able to and what they need to demonstrate in order to be able to earn a 4, a 3, a 2, or a 1. So it's not, I guess when I used to hand things back to kids, they, you know, see 92% A- on the top and like, yay, you know, and there aren't letter grades on the top of anything we hand back now. In geometry, we score each question separately because it's on a different topic, and they can say, like, I can reflect lines and I can rotate lines, but I can't translate lines. I got, you know, these were 4s and this was a 1, and they can ask more specific questions too. And they do. That's the thing that I've been saying to my students so much this week, that they just are blowing me away, because they care. The kids want to learn. No kid wants to fail, and they feel so good about I feel like they just feel empowered that they all can achieve at a higher level because they do know what they need to do. So every teacher is using the same rubric that teaches the same class, making the grade dependent on a student's demonstrated knowledge rather than the individual teacher's interpretation of the learning. our goal district-wide has always been to do our best and be our best for our students. And standards-based learning aligns with best practices, as it's a system that promotes a focus on learning, not just a letter grade that appears on a report card. I found that students, they don't even talk about letter grades. They don't talk about percentages. They have the, I'm not there yet, like Dana said that too, that, you know, if you're at a 2 or a 3, and that's the thing too, I had kids in Wynn today who were retaking things to show me that learning is at a 4, not a 3. They were like, I know I can get a 4, you know, what do I need to do, and practice this and then do a retake, and they got a 4. Like, I love that they're not even like, this is good enough, because a 3 is proficient, but they want to be even higher. And that whole growth mindset, they focus on what they currently know and what progress they need to make to get a better grade. If, you know, if that's
Piggyback on one thing you said too with the empowerment part. It is so cool, and I would highly encourage if anyone wants to come and hang out in my room someday and watch what empowered students can do and how they can help each other out. It is absolutely phenomenal. When you see those kids on the standard reach of 4, and I'm not sure if you've ever sat in a computer science classroom and you have 24 students all with bugs in their program, and you're the only expert in the room. Like Ms. Shimmick is it. Like, I'm the 4 in the room, and I need to get to 24 students and help them debug their program and work it through. But now I've got 3 4s in there, and they see hands raised, and they're running through the room. They're like, I got this, because they're confident. They respect themselves, they respect their peers, and they're able to help them. Like, that is like another thing, that growth mindset, not only for themselves, but for their classmates as well. That pushes them way above the bar. And that's not just common in my room, that's common everywhere.
That's true.
And I think too, as you look at this slide, does it raise or lower the bar? And I realize there's been some conversation about grading scale and the percentages being whatever. And I know that, Tony, you had emailed me a question, how is this going to look like comparing grades? So I did run a report that I wanted to share with you. It actually shows, we took grade distribution from 2017-18. So we wanted something before the pandemic, right? So we took a look at grade distribution. When we say grade distribution, that's how many A's, how many B's, how many C's. So what you're going to see here in comparison at the top that's 17-18. You'll see that the enrollment jumped a little bit. That was grade alignment after this year, so that's why. You'll see the total number of grades given each semester along the right-hand column. And then you're going to see percentages of grades. So one of the things that I think was a connotation with this, or a misconception, is that, well, you're just trying to pass kids through with the 25%. Or it's not about the percentages. You know that we have to take the old scale of 100 and move it to a scale of 4. What you can see here is last year's first year of implementation. We saw about the same number of A's, quite a few less B's, same number of C's, more D's, F's, and incompletes. One thing I'll also note is that they've talked about mindset and learning and a culture of learning. The clock runs out. When you get an incomplete, you got 2 weeks. If you're not showing your evidence of learning, that turns into an F. You didn't do your job. You didn't do your responsibility. And so we're helping our kids learn about how to be accountable for their learning. You don't get the option of sitting this out anymore. You have to show evidence. We have teachers at our school who won't let kids, they'll give an incomplete. If they have 6 standards, and if one of those 6 standards has an incomplete in it, they will issue an incomplete to that student until they fix or show the learning in that standard. This has to be a way for us to ensure that our kids are getting those gotta knows at every grade level of our school. We've moved from a system of compliance, showing up every day, turning in my work on time, bringing in a Kleenex box every once in a while for extra points, to a system that is completely, as Melanie put, competency-based. So when we say, do we know if our kids get it? Yes, we do. We know whether they do or not. And we have systems in place to address when they don't get it. And that, my friends, is the vision of where we're headed with all of this. And that's how it's working right now at Lincoln High School. And so we would like to thank you again for the opportunity to talk with you about this tonight. And also want to answer any questions you might have.
Do you guys give like a 3.25? Does that have 3.1s, or it's just strictly
In averages it does, but when we score things, we try to make it on the whole, because we got to pick a spot where you are. The more 0.5 you get more into the why the 100-point scale doesn't work, because it's, you know, sort of subjective. So we try to say, well, the preponderance of evidence is that you're a 2. You have some of this 3 here, and we might even point out what that 3, what some of those components are. Like you get this, but you need to show us this to get that 3. And they talked a little bit about that.
So do you do an average of the 4, 3, 2, 1?
Yeah.
Do you ever take the 1 through 4 scale and try to go back to the percentages, or no?
So it computes that way in IC. That's why those questions about our grading scale come up, because they're really, they're trying to show you what the averages will end up as on a 4-point scale rather than the 100-point scale. And so that's where some of the confusion has come in. The bottom line is, if I was a kid that has a standard that I need to meet in computer science, and I started out 2, 3, 4, right? So there's an average way to do that, but there's also a way that says, if I start training for the, coach 5K, I don't want to be judged on my time the first day I go out and try to run a couple blocks. I want to be measured at the end, right? So some folks put a emphasis on the more later grades in the semester because they're showing the most recent performance. So a kid who may have struggled early on, who's now killing it, they may look at that average and say, well, it's really showing quite where we were struggling, but we're way up here now. So the grade that reflects learning and the preponderance of evidence that I have in front of me would give the student a 4, not a 3. And so there's the teachers have that latitude based on the evidence that they're collecting for each standard. But using an average is very common in our school.
Do you do A-, A+? Do they exist in this system?
So ironically enough, Lincoln High School final grades, since I've been here, are round grades, A, B, C, D.
Okay.
It fits with the 4-point scale, which we call the GPA. So final grades are always, we do have A-
Right.
and B+, but the way it's calculated at a GPA is you have an A, you have an A, which I always thought was very interesting because there's points in there, but.
But on a report card, we wouldn't see a plus or a minus.
Yep, we do have them on the report card.
How does that determined?
So if we had 6 standards,
Yeah.
and the averages of each standard, then compute into it an overall grade.
Okay.
So if you were to look at our IC right now, you'll basically go to somewhere before where we just have all of our classes listed in your letter grades. It now shows all of the standards, and then in each standard what your grade is or what your average is right now.
Okay.
And then it computes a semester grade on the bottom, which tallies everything up.
Why?
Could I-
Only one other question. Why, on the percentage, why doesn't it equal to 90 to 100 why does it go down to 74?
So that's what I was just
Oh,
gonna
okay.
say,
Thanks.
so the standards-based grading scale is because of the way Infinite Campus is set up by, it just is set up this way that for the district currently. If we give a 3, and this is, I think, a big reason that there's a lot of misconceptions because, and it can be very deceiving because a 2 out of 4 from what we're used to, a 2 out of 4 is 50%. And if students, if parents, if anybody, see, as teachers, when we first did this, I thought, wait a minute, if I'm giving a 2 and I've created a detailed rubric as to what a student needs to do to achieve a 2, it's very different from what a 50% meant in the old grading, traditional system, where to me, a 50% used to mean you are not passing. You know only half of the material. In math especially, that's not enough for you to move on. Speaking to a 75%. So a three is a very solid, like in math, that's going to be, out of a 7-step equation, they made a mistake, in one of the steps that led to the negative answer instead of a positive or something like that. And so a 3 is like, they have a very, very good understanding of something, but it could have been better. They could have shown, demonstrated more knowledge. So I get how a 75%, because 3 divided by 4 is 75, that in our minds, like we're all like 90s are A's, 80s are B's, 70s are C's, but it requires a lot more effort to get a 3. And because I guess the percentages are still there because we still at this point, that's how we get things into Infinite Campus, but there is the hope to move away from percentages because they are just quite arbitrary and support obedience and not like skill ability. I think that the grading systems from the past is just accumulating a certain amount of points to get a letter grade. And all the points that made up a grade were not directly tied to standards, and now they are.
And I would piggyback that by stating, like, I'm not sure where we got so caught up in the percentage system. Because if you guys think back, or if you've gone to any elementary conference in our area or any elementary conference, we've never had a percentage. We've never been wrapped around the percentage. You go to these conferences and what do we get? I think it's a beginning, developing, or on target, right? B, a D, and O. And I know that my 8-year-old son has to work his, back end off, right? In order to get that, in order to be that, we would say a 4, right? He has to work really hard. And those are all attached to standards too. Standards aren't a new thing. We've had standards since the beginning of time, right? It's just that it's new to our area. So we're trying to learn the language, but elementary level, we haven't ever had a percentage. And I'm not sure where it became such a thing that the percentage in and of itself establishes a good grading criteria. Because some of the best learning I had was when I was like, or that I've seen at some points, is like my kids in elementary school, because I knew exactly where they were at and exactly where they needed to grow. Those standards were there, those benchmarks were there, and we could work on developing those skills to get them to the next level. And I never saw a percentage.
I think I can see the benefit to what you're saying. I think the challenge is a lot of people aren't familiar with that, right? So, the first thing they see is, hey, 50%. I'm like, man, that's not good, right? When I was growing up, that was an F. But now that I'm hearing you guys explain it, I could see the, some of the potential benefits in having, clear, defined outcomes. I think that's a good thing. And I guess, just thinking back to what I'm familiar with, the ABC system, like I would typically get that. And I thought that was a pretty good indicator, but maybe not as clear as you got to hit X, Y, Z to get a 3. Right?
And I think it just adds to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I agree with you, right? I thought I got feedback with A, B, C, D too, but it all pretty correlates pretty well to that 4-point scale. Because if you think about GPA, that's what it is. A 4 is an A, a 3 is a B, 2, 1. And so this really, even with our percentages, it correlates to that standard. And so it is something that if we're going to grasp onto something we're familiar with, it's the 4.0 GPA. That 4-point system does match with our 4-point rubric. And that's one of the reasons I think kids have grabbed onto it pretty quickly, is because they're understanding this. They're understanding what they need to do on those levels. Instead of calling it ABC, they're calling beginning, developing, proficient.
And the whole
advanced.
yet, like
Correct. Not here
there
yet.
They don't feel like, I heard Rebecca say, I think that, the test anxiety is so much less. 100% in math, because that was always like, test day today, because I put dividers up on test day so they'd see them out on the tables and they freak out. But now I'm like, you guys, today we are having an assessment and I want to find out where you're at today. And that's all it is. Just take a deep breath. It's just where you're at today so that we can figure out what we need to do, you know, where you're at and how we're going to get you where we want you to be. And if today you're not there, I think about like the arbitrary time frame that we would put on learning. And I'm kind of amazed at how I got the grades I did in school when you think about like, you know, this paper was due on this day and I don't ever remember being able to redo anything, to retake anything. If you didn't, you know, let's say you had an A going in physics and then you failed the test, like, oh, not getting an A anymore, blew that. And so then you're kind of like, why am I trying to get A's anymore? Because I for sure the highest I can get is a B. So like, and kids just, they know that there's no limit to where they can go with this. I have a saying on my wall that says, all students can learn, just not on the same day or in the same way. And I refer to that all the time to the kids that they have so much less anxiety because of that, like, okay, I don't know it yet. I had a kid come in today during WIN who had all ones on an assessment that she took. And so she came in to retake it and she like pushed it over to me and she said, I don't understand anything. And I looked at the clock and so we wrote down what time it was on our paper, 10:07. We had 20 minutes. I had been helping a lot of kids. I didn't get to her. We have 47 minutes for WIN, which is a nice chunk of time. But so I said, all right, well, let's start diving into what you didn't understand. And when I said, not a single person that I've ever talked to who said, I don't understand anything, truly doesn't, you know, have zero knowledge. So we talked for 8 minutes. We talked through what she did wrong. I asked a lot of questions, had her practice similar problems, and it was now 10:20. And so we had 7 minutes left. And I said, can I schedule you for a WIN later this week so you can retake this assessment? Because there's probably not time today. And she said, sure. And I had it sitting on the table. I forgot that I had it there because the plan was for her to take it, but she was like, I'm not ready to retake it. And so we had our discussion and it was still there. I walked away. I came back and she handed it to me and it was done. And she had it done in 5 minutes and every single problem was right. And it just, I could have cried because she said, like, she was just in shock that she said to me at 10:07, I have no idea what I'm doing. And she'd been absent the week that we'd been studying things and just the one-on-one time that, you know, you can spend with students, but her whole, like, if we didn't use this type of grading scale, like, she totally failed. And then she was like, okay, I failed. Like, why am I going to keep trying? Because I for sure can't get an A and probably not a B in the class, but she now knows like every single one of us can do well. And that it just is a representation, a certain grade is a representation of what they know at that time. But not, it doesn't represent the limit to which they can, you know, go. And I just would end with students, if we believe that all kids can learn, they believe that they can learn. And that's just been a powerful thing that has been different from using this system than any other time that I've ever.
I think to piggyback off that, Stacy had mentioned about the percentages and stuff, having come into the district using standards-based learning and having to convert that into percentages, the F was 60 and my 1 was 60. All I did was move the scale. All I did was move the percentages. So I didn't change the way I was teaching. I just manipulated it to fit the grading program. And then when I went to the grading program, I had like 16 choices of which percentage scale I wanted to use because so many teachers in the school were using different percent. And as a student, I can think back to that.
And
there were 2 math teachers in the high school I graduated from. They were both great people. They were both hilarious and they were both nice. But I wanted Mr. K because his A level was 85 to 100 and Mr. L, his grading level was 90 to 100. And I know as myself, being a kid who really wanted to be valedictorian and really wanted to get scholarships, I better have him So if my schedule said the other teacher, I was like, crap, what am I gonna do? Because they're both, you know, we still have kids that say, oh, I want this teacher over that teacher. And a lot of times it has to do more with personality, or just the way, you know, that you gel with the teacher. But it's never going to be because one teacher's an easier grader, which I think in a huge school, especially where you might have 6 teachers teaching a content area, that's huge, because I don't hear kids saying anymore like, oh, I'm so glad I have Mrs. Conrad because she's the easy grader. It doesn't happen that way, because she's also looking at the other grades. And the other.
Lee, wouldn't you say that probably one of the more important issue here is the standard is really, the rigor of a standard is really known by its assessment. So it's your scoring rubric that is probably most important in terms of the rigor you put in there. What is that for expectation? Because you can meet a standard at a very low level or a very high level if you're thinking an ACT. So really the significance that we should all be aware of is how our teachers work together to create a high scoring rubric. You know, so that that expectation is really high in all those categories.
And thank you for pointing that out, because that is an importance of our PLC time, so we can spend that time doing those certain
That's why
things
sometimes
together.
we are all checking and comparing how we are assessing to make sure we're at that high level. You know, so that consistency. The other thing, just because we use terms sometimes so we don't necessarily clarify them, sometimes you might have heard the saying, an inch deep and a mile wide. That's what the United States does in terms of what it wants you to know. And we talk about power standards. You hear that often. Would you explain power standards, why that's important?
The most important thing.
The
So,
most important thing. We don't
there's
start
a
with the
lot of
most
them.
important thing. We give you everything. And we
Yeah.
have to say, what's the most important
and dive
here?
deeper into it. Yeah. Thank you.
I just have a few comments here. I have quite a bit, but first of all, thank you for everybody being here. I do support the spirit of what we're trying to achieve. And when I mean that, I mean it sincerely. So I just want to kind of have a discussion with you right now. So from my experiences at UW Oshkosh and UW Stout, this grading rubric in education is there. That's how we all have been taught to get our grades. It was always a 1 through 4. And the emphasis is on the only word you guys did not say that you should have was lifelong learning. That's the only term you guys didn't use that we were taught in education. So lifelong learning, that's my advice. Anyways, but that's what the essence of what we were trying to get at. So the 1 through 4 grade point, the 1 through 4 rubric was used in college extensively in education. So I do believe in the merit of reflection and growth and learning, and that's I'm 100% on board with that. However, there are some drawbacks, and I'll be the first to be honest with us, because when we started college, or when I started college, let's say, my professor said, "It's okay, Matt, if you only get a 1 or a 2," because and I'm like, "No, it's not. I just worked at Lincoln High School. I'm going to be good. I'm going to get a 4 right away as a freshman in college." I'm like, no. It's okay. Let's do our pre-assessment, which we are all doing to our freshman in high school or sophomore, depending on when you get introduced to that class period. And the benchmark is a 1 or a 2 because, you know, you got a lot to learn, Matt. But I was paying for my education in college, personal paying for it. Took student loans out, whatever. I paid for it. I was in I was in the driver's seat. I got to get what I wanted to put in. And when you do that, you can reflect, you can grow. And that's what the essence of what you're saying. You're saying if you're only doing a 2 or a 3 and you reflect, you'll see the standards with the education standards, you can align them right together with your subject matter. You aren't getting this or this, and then you need to get that or that to get a 4. So I can understand how we can use that in the classroom, which I believe all effective educators have been doing this for hundreds of years. So if Johnny wasn't doing so good with understanding how to do his push-ups or how to write a quadratic equation, the teacher would articulate that to the student through a conversation that, you know, you're doing great on this, but you're missing on this. And that's how we taught young people to grow and learn, through articulation of, you went there and you said, well, I don't want to just do a word search. What do I need to learn? And so the standards are great to use to articulate exact points of growth. However, when you went to high school, and when I went to high school, there's some students that go there because they have to go there, not because they're paying for it themselves. So the downfall, which is good yet at sometimes, when Mr. Bongo says, well, Johnny, you gotta do this work and you're gonna get a grade then. So that like you can have them say, hey, we gotta get from A to B to C. So that's great too, that you have a lower side of it sometimes where students can see what they're not doing, and then that's a roadmap to what they should be doing. However, life starts when okay, let's say the legal definition, when you're an 18-year-old, you can make your own decisions unless you're exonerated. So when we're done from 15 to 18 years old, some of these students need to be ready for life. And when we have that secular growth pattern of Johnny being able to grow a little more every day, my question is the pace of content, the rate of content. You explained it a little bit. You kind of said, incomplete is 2 weeks, they haven't done it. Now they're going to get an incomplete. It's going to be an incomplete. However, with late work, and I'm not picking on you, but if you pay me to build a house for you and I do half of it, are you going to give me half the money, or are you going to give me no money? So I'm not trying to offend. I'm saying that there's a beginning, middle, and end of a standard, and if they don't achieve it, or if they achieve some of it, they have to be held accountable to being able to perform their job. Like, I'm not going to hire somebody to say that if they know the safety procedures, but they don't know how to hold a hammer, I'm not going to hire them more than a couple days because they aren't even at the baseline of what I need to have to do my job so that they can be effective members of the community. So I'm with you guys. I'm with you. Let me finish. There's some problems that we've addressed as a community here about the percentage. And I think in the future we'll fix this. How a 75 is a passing. But I think with how we input this in infant canvas, we're all very smart people. Maybe we can articulate that, our community members and our parents, that because the rubric brace is great. Like, it's great how we implement it, because then we can show our students, especially in the electives, because there's a subjective ability to have objective truths to, they can do this and this and this. So I agree, the rubric is great, and a very, very challenging rubric is what we need at every level, and that's our PLC, we get that done. But we have to somehow work together to understand that late work in school might be okay a couple times, but in the real world, if I don't go to work, there's consequences, and we have to articulate that to our children, that if you do some of it, you're great, you're going on the right path, but you're not there yet. So those are a couple things I had.
Can
I
I
didn't
speak
want to
to
rant.
some of
Sure,
those before?
answer my question.
So like late work to me does not translate to like not going to work and being like somebody turning something in late are not the same thing. So do you feel like a grade?
I don't feel, but what?
Do you feel like a grade should reflect learning and
So
what a student
you're
knows?
saying growth, and then yes, I believe growth.
Should the grade reflect
Grade should
what they
reflect
know?
learning is what you said, which I agree. That
Okay.
is defining growth. That is
So if the
defining
grade
growth.
should be defined by learning,
Growth,
would
you be okay with growth?
no,
No, I wouldn't either.
no. There should always be growth, but a grade is not like,
An assessment, right?
the grade should not reflect growth. Like, the grade should reflect what a student knows. My husband has his own business, and does construction and is constantly, anybody in that world knows that you could tell somebody that I think this bathroom remodel is going to take a week. And then you start knocking down walls and you find that there are mice in the walls, or this is the current job he's doing, and the wood is rotten, and like all of these additional things need to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And that has nothing to, like, he is doing great work. His work might not be done in a week. And so he's learned a lot as he's over time with his business to not say,
Yeah.
I can have this done in this many hours. He's gonna do great work. Things that he can't always control are gonna get in the way. And the other thing with none of us promotes turn things in late. No one promotes that. No one says it's
I agree
fine.
with you 100%.
If a kid turns something into me that is high quality work,
Mhm.
like if you're gonna deduct points because things are late, how long do you keep doing that? Because if you keep doing it indefinitely, you will get to a point where that assignment, assessment, project no longer holds value. So the message you're giving the
Well, that's not
student
what I was saying.
is if you're doing it late, just don't even bother anymore because you can't get the same score as somebody else. Now, like our whole goal, like if you asked me what I do for a living, yes, my degree says that I'm a math teacher, but I want to prepare the kids that walk into my room to leave Lincoln High School as productive members of our community. And like when we tell them, when you're at a job or like phones, it's been very helpful to have a code of conduct this year because we can, there's a time and a place for your phone to be out. If
So
you're on
structure's
your
good
phone all the
for
time,
fun.
when you're, that's not appropriate. And they, like I said before, with kids want to learn, like kids want to be successful when they leave Lincoln High School. They don't want to get fired in their jobs. They trust and believe us that we want what's best for them and are going to model it and expect it from them. So did it take some change in my mindset too? Like I said, what I think all of us that have been doing this for a while can look back to what we did at the very beginning of our careers. I started in 1998, took 7 years off because the math people wouldn't make sense as to why I'm at year 18. But anyway, I gave homework assignments and we graded it on effort and they got 10 points and that was it. And each chapter they had about 100 points of homework points they accumulated and tests were 100 points. And so and then things were late every day. So then it's saying, don't bother practicing anymore because the practice isn't worth anything. Did the kids have to change their mindset when we started this? Yes. Absolutely. Did the parents? Yes. I think that our administration put together some extremely helpful, parent-friendly materials. And you can obviously speak to this more than I can, but from what I have heard from parents that I've spoken to, who aren't in education, and from what I remember you saying when you explain to somebody how this works, like the conversations I had at parent-teacher conferences, which are happening less and less, people asking, why is 75% of B? Because they are understanding it. We have communications that are attached to the parent Monday memo weekly. And, our administration put themselves out there to be available to anyone that has questions. So I think that's what I would love to see is just, if people have questions, like Melanie said, please talk to anyone that can answer those questions to help them understand, those questions are valid questions. It shows they care. And we should have good explanations and reasons behind what we do. And we do. So we certainly welcome, those questions.
I'll follow up if I may. The issue being the belief I have is my feelings don't dictate if I get to do my job or not. So
What do you
let me finish this. So when I have, like tonight, I'm missing out time with my children, which some of you are as well. And I don't really feel like being here, but I want to be here for the community and I want to serve my community. So that's why I'm here. So I do things every single day that I don't feel they are very fun, in my opinion. And I've learned how to overcome those challenges with perseverance, which I don't want to get in. So that's my point about, I understand what you're saying about if you take points off every day, they don't do their homework. I'm just coming from the perspective that I don't use my feelings to determine my decisions all the time. So that's that one. And my last point, I will shut up, is accounting 1 and 2 from LTC credits that we were championing about. They have a grading scale. Is that collaborated with our grading scale? Because
So when we
I know the
started,
answer to this, but
yeah, it's a good question because when we started going to this, we sat down with LTC because we have a number of these agreements.
Mhm.
We wanted to make sure that none of those would be in jeopardy. They absolutely respect our grades with the system we have. And not only that, is that they're moving to competency-based grading now. So the grading scales that we had in place when we took it to I met on a screen with all the deans, went over everything. They have no concerns because what we were able to tell them is when you get one of our kids, you're going to know that they know
through the rubric.
this, and this more than you will ever have on 87%. So they were very appreciative
So how
of
do they
that
assess
as well. What's that?
How do they assess? Is there a placement test or do they just?
They take our grades.
Okay.
Yep, transcripted credit. So they earn, help me.
Yep, no, I got it.
They earn, what's the level that our students earn for
For
transcripted?
LTC.
85.
Through accounting.
About 85, they have to be at 85% at
Yeah.
LTC in order to get.
So,
like
but
the
they'll
credits.
take our B, right? Because
That's
they believe it's equivalent based
So-
off of our rubrics.
constructive learning together right now. What I'm trying to achieve is how we can communicate that with our community.
Yeah.
With the 75%, with how we fix our percentages. So that's what I'm trying to be transparent about right
Sure.
now. So thank you.
Thank you.
Can I jump in really quick? I just wanted to share with you too, so being career and technical education, it's super important that kids are ready for the workforce. Like
Yeah,
that's what
CTE.
my goal is, right?
Sure.
As a CTE, student learning liaison, that's one of them. And also my background came from industry, right? So, I mean, my master's is in business. I've owned multiple businesses, still do. So it is important for me to hire people that have those skills. Soft skills are learned in our classrooms. That is an absolute norm. So much that one of our state standards is, I mean, CD4 A98. But what that means is use positive qualities typically desired in each career's cluster, in each person's career cluster pathways. So there is a whole rubric that we have in CTE that actually this is what we're doing. Because I would be, if you can't tell, we're all extremely passionate about what we do. I would be super embarrassed to send somebody to you that doesn't have all of those qualities. So it's to a trades industry, right? So in CTE, that is something that we absolutely focus on. Are they prompt and prepared? Are they polite? Are they constantly on their cell phone? Proper use of technology, right? All of those things are something that is done and is part of a state standard, actually. So I just wanted to point that out for you.
So like I said, I agree 100% about rubrics. I just kind of highlighted some of the disadvantages of the pre-assessment and post-assessment. I'm all for reflection, learning, and growth. However, the buy-in is getting them to, because obviously we're not having problems with our top 10% of our classes, right? No. So we're having problems with our bottom and our middle. So what I'm saying is we need, which Mr. Bongo said quite correctly, you got to have a beginning. And if they aren't at the beginning, then you can objectively show them the rubric of what they're missing. So I do agree, which is, do you have a comment?
Yeah, you can finish, and then I just wanted to comment on what you were saying about late work. And I just kind of wanted to explain, because you said there's no consequence. So this is how I run it in my classroom, and I think a lot of teachers here probably do something similar. So with their practice work that they do, they don't turn it in, they don't get the opportunity to relearn. So that's a consequence. Or today I had about 8 kiddos that didn't do their claim evidence reasoning assessment last week. They lost the opportunity to go to a fun win, and they had to come with me and sit down, and I made them do the assessment. So the consequence was losing out on that fun time. So they're doing it. The failure is not an option.
Are we effectively reaching the top students right here? I'm trying to be funny. How, and I'm not very funny. So how we get the enrichment level of how we did, because if I do a 4 right off the bat, I'm doing a 4, how do I get to a 5? Because that's what you're always achieving. And so please explain.
Yes, so we do enrichment opportunities. That is something that, we have pulled. I was an IB literature teacher and we still had the IB literature program. And you have to all understand that I have also taught everything from like third grade, reading interventions at Kokona. So we did reading interventions. I was a 7th grade teacher and I had students come in with like even 1st grade reading abilities. And I taught them how to do those things. So like, I'm good on the intervention stuff. That's one of my strengths. But also we have enrichments and we plan those enrichments and I pull from the area that I have learned outside of those interventions and my IB studies that I have done, which have taught me to be a much better teacher, by the way. And I create those learning opportunities. And I think that's really important, is that it's really, really hard for us to narrow to specifically state what a 4 is on the rubric, because the 4 is the universe. It is expansive, it is creative, and there is no limitation on.
Is it obtainable?
Sure.
That's part of what it needs to be. Yeah, right. It has to be.
Yeah,
Right, that's what I wanted to
It
make
has
sure
to
you said.
So like there are so many, when I look at students with analysis skills, and I look at like, wow, you're really, because it's explanation analysis into different things. Explanation say, what is happening? Analysis is breaking it down, right? I'm like, wow, you are really breaking this down. Let me tap into that information I have in that previous study that I have done. Let's not talk about applications in the world. Where are we seeing these problems in the world? Let's start talking about things that we can do to help those problems. Let's start pulling this in, and like what you do is you get that engagement piece, right? They're like, okay, wait, I'm a leader now. I can start talking about these things. So that pushes them to a whole different level on that 4 than what they would have been on that 3, because we need to apply it outside. If I may kind of point out something that I feel like we are circling around. It is, and this is arguable, but it is a part of the human condition to attack what we fear or what is unknown. It's why the pilgrims were afraid of the woods. They didn't know what was out there before they ventured into them, right? The only reason I know that as an English teacher is because I have taught the crucible. But we fear the things that we do not understand. And I think that this is what is happening in our community, is that we are, because we don't understand what is happening, we're quick to be like, oh, wait, I'm not comfortable. And then we have to put a stop to it and we kind of attack it. But a lot of that magic happens outside of the comfort zone. A lot of that magic happens when you go out into the woods and you see what is there. All of a sudden your world gets a whole lot bigger, right? So I think that's what's happening. And we do need to clarify that and communicate that to our community. But goodness, like, ask the kids, because they understand it.
I would just add to that, it's always important what you just said relative to the context of what you might be talking about. Here we're talking about something that clearly is, as we've all seen, the meaningfulness of what you're saying. But because we don't know, okay,
Right.
there are other things though that
fair.
there are different opinions.
Sure.
And I think we have to always remember context here in terms of what we're making reference to, because that makes perfect sense with what we just discussed.
And if I could add on to that, just from a messaging standpoint, the thing to me that stuck out the most that I thought was probably the most valuable part of this program was just the consistency in grading across. And, when I asked why, I don't think anyone, unless it's possible I missed it, I don't remember anyone saying that. So I think that would be a key point in effectively messaging this to the community on why we're doing it, because I could see that being an issue. If there's 6 English teachers and they're all reading it subjectively, then it's just like, well, I want the easy one too, right? So I get that, but a couple other quick questions I had, guys. Are there any issues potentially, with the transition to this new system, with kids that may have been caught in the middle as far as like their first 2 years were in the old system, then they go to the new system, and how does that impact, their GPA and applying for college and that type of thing? Are there any concerns with that, or am I overthinking that?
I think what you see in that grade distribution report is really your answer, that we didn't see a very dramatic shift in our grades.
Yeah.
You know, the A's are about the same, B's are slightly less, C's are about the same, D's and F's were more. I think the shift, honestly, that kids probably struggled with the most was that I was used to, I had this system figured out. And if I was here every day, turned my stuff in on time, looked for opportunities for extra credit, I could get my A. Whereas now you have to show me what you know. You know, I think Mr. File used an example, I think in one of the meetings about a free throw shooter in basketball. We know where they're at after they shoot 10 free throws. We know where they're at after they complete our performance tasks and we can show them. So that was probably the biggest transition, is just for kids saying, oh, well, I got to really show them that I know this, as opposed to how do I get the A, right? I'll tell this one story. My daughter transitioned from elementary to middle school. And when you talked about our kids, it was, what did you do at school today? Well, Dad, we learned this, or we did this. And then she went to middle school after the free. Well, what did you, I'm getting all A's. I'm getting, well, no, well, what did you learn today? I'm getting all, oh, I don't care about your grade. I want to know what you learned. And so that is shifting back to the heart of what we're doing, is the learn and not the grade.
Is this in all the schools now, or just, high school in the district?
We have it at the high school.
I have 3 sons that one is a senior right now, and one graduated last year and 1 year before that. So they all experienced, both. And it definitely, like Mr. Tennis said, took, some, like, they needed to understand why we were doing it that way. And so there were more conversations had openly with students and teachers than we have anymore. I mean, I still am very happy to have a conversation with any parents and with any of my students about, how they got a grade, because it shouldn't be some very subjective thing. But they, like why do I have to show work if I did my math and if I got the right answer in my head? And like, they don't say that anymore, because I said, well, what, like, if I'm gonna assign a grade to this, score this, I want to show what you know. And they'll say, yeah. And I said, if all I see is a number, I don't know how you got to that number. If I just tell you that 2 squared is 4 and don't explain that you multiply the base by by itself 2 times, you might assume that the base times the exponent is how you get the answer. And so 3 squared is 6. Well, no, it's not. It just happens to be that 2 times 2 is the same as what 2 squared is, but like 3 squared is not what 3 times 2 is. And they get that, like, oh, I have to show you my learning by, showing work or giving an explanation. And that also allows me to be able to help them when they make mistakes, because they're going to, and then I can address, find out where they're at and intervene at them. Like, it's just crazy to me that the kids can ask specific questions about what they need help on. Like, it's crazy in that for so many years I didn't hear that. There were kids that wanted A's and would do anything they could to get A's. And then, everybody else just kind of fell where they fell, kind of thing. Like, I was always working to not have anybody fail, but I think kids, just everybody sees 4s as within their reach, and they feel like, I just feel like they seem more energized about, like, our teachers believe in us and they work hard to make sure that they're going to prepare us for leaving here and being successful.
Sure. One other question I had, besides Oostburg, how many other high schools in the area are doing this? Is this pretty common?
Very common. It's very, yeah. Kiel High School, where I came from, does it.
I just went to a computer science training this weekend. There was 50 of us there. There was 1 school not represented with standard-based grading. So every other school there had standard-based grading except for us. So when they came, I had a computer science training this weekend, and this past weekend in Milwaukee, and that's one of the common questions, so they can help us make our rubrics for classes. We can all be, aligned properly. And of the 50 people there, and some of them had matching schools, but I would say there's about 25 different areas represented, and there was only one place that did not have standard-based grade. So.
Thank you. And, one final comment I have, I thought there was some good discussion and valid points on both sides, on the, turning in things late and, how do you grade that? And, does it demonstrate learning? And I could definitely see, obviously the kid's doing good work, but I think from Matt's point, sometimes, and not if the objective is to prepare kids for real life, right? Sometimes in real life, and I'm speaking from experience, if I'm late on a bid, I may not give a second chance, even if my work is immaculate. So I just want to make sure that, and I kind of got the vibe that this was being done. We're not encouraging that behavior, but we should encourage the students to, hey, we got timelines, we have to meet those timelines in the real world.
Yeah, those things are stressed.
Yeah.
Every day with my kids, there is a conversation that ties into life after high school, right? Like, okay, if you do this on the job, what do you think is going to happen?
Sure.
So it definitely, we tie that in to the future, and that you can't do those things. And so you're going to practice it here, and I'm going to help. I'm going to model it for you. I'm going to show you so that when you are off on your own, you can do it.
Hey, Matthew. Oh, hang on, sorry. Yeah,
Somebody can take this and run with it if they like, but I would like to ask, since you've implemented the standard-based grading, have your multiple levels of the classroom, when I mean multiple levels, because you now are in a circular motion of education, have you increased your groups or breakouts, or however you want to define it, or have you kept them the same with your teaching style? Because now you have a rubric to guide the level of competency of each child. Anybody can answer the question, if it's a good question.
I could just speak from being a parent. So my son, in sixth grade, he was always told, yeah, you're really good at math and English. So he got a fixed mindset that he was really good at math and English. And he was, state test scores were decent and everything like that. He had a seventh grade teacher at Wilson last year that taught standards-based completely. And his very first paper that he got back, he got slammed on, and he was ticked off. And he said to me, but I'm good at English. How come I got ripped? And she sat him down. She had him in intervention. She showed him exactly what he needed to fix. So he's like, whatever, I'll do what she said. He turned him back in. She shot him down again. He was getting really ticked off. And she pushed and pushed and pushed him all year. We had parent-teacher conferences. He got his first B- on his report card. And I knew he was better than that, but really he's so used to being told he was good at something. By the end of the year, he did earn his A, but I will tell you, when he got his state test scores back, they jumped by so much that he passed up his math, which he was considered to be at, whenever they did the IQ test, that was his genius level. His ELA score passed up tremendously. So I told him, I said, you take that score, and I said, what do you think you need to do? And he's like, I gotta think. I'll just say it. I gotta thank Mrs. Clevette for kicking my butt.
Oh,
And I will say that he did. He took that to her, and that was a huge thing because he had a fixed mindset in the other way. You're really good. You're really, really good. And then he was like, I hate this teacher. She's terrible. It's butt. And I mean, when I had conversations with her, she's like, he's just doing what it takes to get by.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you for the story. And that wasn't the quite point was trying to get at. Do you understand what I'm asking?
I think you're asking, if I may reiterate.
Sure.
For understanding, how are we working with students in small group or strategy group instruction, and how are we pulling those students, and if those strategy groups stay the same, and almost in a way of tracking, kind of.
I'm saying, Mr. Tennis, maybe I'll try to give you this. So what I'm saying is, so you have a classroom of 30, and you have content that you're trying to, you have a train, we'll call it a progress train, okay? And you have a consistency with that train of content through the unit. and you have 5 or 6 students that are right on there with pace of what your content is, and then you have maybe 5 or 6 students that are at a 3 or a 2 in that aspect. I'm saying, is standard-based grading giving you the ability to define those levels better?
Yes,
than-
yes.
So that's why I said runway,
Yeah.
because this is probably an advantage of standard-based grading, because you can clearly define the differences in understanding.
And then you can
And
perfectly
then you can fix them,
differentiate.
yeah. So that's the spirit of grade. However, have we changed the pace then, or have we, because we're teachers and we've been teachers, have you kept the pace the same, or that's the real question within the question. Does anybody have an answer on this?
May I speak to this point? Have you ever seen those graphs that are like time lapse, like, you know, the amount of pollution that America or all these other countries have done over time, and you see the graphs moving back and forth over like 20 years of how much we've done in comparison to like other countries, right? Like that is a thing that's like out on social media, but it also shows like a time lapse. So when we look at learning and we're breaking down these standards into skills, a student might excel in one skill. Cool, that's great. I'm going to run with you because you are excelling with that. I'm going to meet you where you are so you're not stagnant in that learning. Okay, and then I'm going to push you in that certain skill. But then they might fall into another category in a different skill. Okay, so now we're going to differentiate. We're going to apply some strategy group instruction. Or some, that's what we call it, the common strategy instruction, small group instruction. Okay, so now they're over here. So then I'm pulling them up. Now, if you like look at my data that I have, you're going to see on that data sheet that like, you know, we have dots, we have lines. Okay, this is one that's like, what do the hieroglyphics mean, right? Well, if you look, some of those dots are slashes because that student grew there, right? So they are moving and I'm moving with them at their pace. And that is one of the like cool parts about standards-based learning is I can identify that you have grown right there. So I'm going to keep you moving because we know that a ball that keeps going, we want it to keep going, right? So I want you to keep learning and keep moving on that specific strategy or on that, a skill. Right? So they're not stagnant in that way. But if you fall behind, because learning is not just a projected growth, we sway back and forth on our abilities and what we know and what we can do. If you fall behind, I am also going to be there to catch you and help you move up. So like, I mean, it's demonstrated on that data that you have that students that when you look at that, you're like, oh yeah, wait. And obviously you can probably figure out what the dots mean and when they turn into dashes, or those, you know, when they turn into X's, what those mean. It connects to those things.
Thank you. Well, I guess I still haven't been answered the question. Maybe there isn't an answer. Have we had more differentiation groups because of standard-based grading? Have we had no change, or have we had more? That's my question.
I think I can answer that. So when you're teaching, you want to be you want to have an understanding of where your kids are. And so what standards-based learning allows us to do with those very things we started the presentation with, being insanely clear with kids about what we want them to know or be able to do, and then giving them the feedback they need to get better. So what I would say is we use our WIN system in a way that, let's say that I have some students that I feel are falling off that pace you were talking about. What I can do is pull them in that for that extra time to work on those specific things that I'm seeing in their performance that they need to get feedback on to get better. So yes, the answer is yes. We have been able to get kids into more individualized or personalized learning opportunities from where they're at, because we know better where they're at on every skill we're measuring, as opposed to the old way we would grade.
And you're utilizing WIN instead of before or after school or
Correct.
before
Right.
lunchtime.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, I'm gonna interject here, guys. We're at 2.5 hours and we're only on point number 2. So, not good with math, Chris, but if I calculate, we're at about an 11-hour meeting. So, I think we're getting very technical too with our questions. I think it's been great. But I would suggest that if any of us think of anything else, that we turn to Lee and we can always send us the correct person. So
Absolutely.
with that, I want to thank you guys for all your time and for your explanation tonight. I think we all have a much greater understanding of what you're doing up at Lincoln, and it sounds wonderful. So thank you so much. I just got to wrap the grade part around my head, but I get what you're doing. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Appreciate it.
I even took that to open.
I think we joked about that.
We did.
That's probably that.
Looks like we might be taking a break.
Yeah, we should make that. We're doing that. All right, do you need a motion to? Okay, we're gonna be ready. All right, we're gonna be taking like a 5 to 10 minute break here and then we'll go back.
What was that, Kathy?
And we're gonna take like 5 to 10 minute break, quick.
5 minutes.
Yeah, just for a stretch.
Yes.
I have glasses.
You can see it.
What's that?
I can't see anymore after a while. My eyes start to get like
Yeah.
tired. It's good now.
It's when we were talking about before about yelling and stamina, and I'm thinking, oh, that would be me. I need to work on my stamina like reading. You just start getting really tired and my eyes are watering.
It sucks when you know what questions to ask them. Sorry.
All good.
I have to. I gotta work on my comedic skills.
Oh, boy.
So 6 o'clock tomorrow night, Stacy, there's a meeting.
Finance.
And the new one, second again, what? In cold,
The
huh?
new one is not, it's not gonna be recorded at all.
That time of year where
This is with the foundation.
no matter how much,
Yeah.
how many layers you got on, it's cold.
I-
So I'm not gonna do,
Yes,
unless you want.
I think it's just for us to, figure out how to collaborate with them.
That's good.
Yes,
They're excited to show us the pamphlet,
all right,
according to Dawn.
perfect.
Did you see our pamphlet yet? No. All right. Wait a minute. Oh, that's so quiet. That's weird.
It is, yeah, it's very quiet.
It's almost eerie. It's so weird.
Break the record, man.
Can we try not to? Yeah, goal.
Just joking, come on.
I'm just glad that
You know-
I'm just glad I'm not the only one.
The last ones should not, they really shouldn't take up that long. Unless we stretch it out. Right, the last 5. There's not much for code of conduct.
Is your meeting this week?
Monday, yeah.
Monday.
For code of conduct, yeah. Yes, Monday, 4:15. Feel free to come. Okay, I think we're pretty much back. Are we ready to regather ourselves? All right, the next, guys, is on the middle school level science resource pilot. I think, Katie, are you speaking? Oh, Pam is. Thank you.
So, just a couple of things. We did have the resource available on the website, electronically, and then also had it available in our central office reception area. Have not had anyone come into the reception area to look at the physical resource, and have not really heard any feedback, from the digital, opportunities. So, the other piece I wanted to mention is that I kept the original proposal, but added some of the feedback from last time that was requested to that document as an addendum. So the last 3 pages of the document reflect to that. The first piece under the addendum on page 7 is our science, middle school science student learning liaison. Had pulled together just a kind of a graphic to capture what is the difference between science education kind of then and now. And so just gives you a quick snapshot of the way that science education has evolved from what we might have previously done. So helps to give a little picture. And then the next page, pages 8, actually just page 8, gives that comparison between iQuest, which is our current resource, and the Open SciEd. So you can see they're both connected to the next gen science standards, but iQuest, they talk about an alignment to them, where Open SciEd really was designed with those standards in mind and how to best tackle them. You can see the curriculum rating. Ed Reports indicates at this point that iQuest does not meet their expectations for some of the connection to the standards and the best practices, and they're talking about the fact that they really don't do a good job at getting at those different types of learning, practice pieces, as well as some other resources, where Open SciEd actually got a badge from the next gen design badge from the organization that evaluates. It's called Equip, that evaluates science materials. So it's a little bit of a difference. And again, it was an update from where iQuest started out looking at the next gen standards. Open SciEd is just taking that a next step forward. And then you have some cost comparison there. And then the last part, page 9 and 10 are the allowing you to see the scope and sequence. I think we talked last time about the fact that just a little bit of a difference in terms of when some of the concepts are taught, but very similar concepts taught across middle schools. So just gives you both curriculums really look at kind of those inquiry questions to drive the instruction for the different units.
I had a couple questions for you, Pam. Hopefully you have short answers. Because I really looked at this, I think, well, again, with a new set of eyes. And so am I correct in assuming this is like our 1-year trial period with this, that we're testing the water, so to say, with the curriculum? Okay. And so it will cost us approximately $7,000 for this year to do that?
No.
That was
Right
for
now,
iQuest?
iQuest right now is costing us about $7,000 this
Okay.
year. Open SciEd, if you recall, because it's open and available, it could be free.
Almost free.
The only cost would be if teachers want this.
That's right. Okay.
This is the cost, and I think
Just
these,
nominal,
are about $7
Right.
to do.
Okay, and then, so
Or 7.
2 of my other questions were, so we, in your presentation, it says currently 6th to 8th grade is using multiple resources, correct? So why are we changing or thinking about doing that, if we're already using multiple resources? Like, are we picking the best fruit from each branch, so to say, to use in our slides? Or are we just really looking for a whole program?
We're looking for a whole program. So the reason for the multiple resources is because when we made the shift to the iQuest, we kept a few of the old.
Okay.
And now the goal would be to shift, to look at the opportunity to potentially shift to one consistent resource across the board.
Okay.
Again, what the request right now in front of the committee is, because we've gone through the review process, haven't really had any feedback, would be to approve moving forward to the board, the request for a pilot for 1 year to have each grade level pilot a few units, collect some data, and come back to the committee probably around May to talk about what is the impact on student performance that we're seeing from this resource, and really taking a look at the feedback from the staff in terms of the implementation of the skills that they want to build, and also really the friendliness of using that resource to engage students in science.
Yeah, I really like the idea that it gives us an opportunity to test it before we really buy into something. So I think that's great. But I did come up with one more question, and that was, so we are talking about using like a sample area to explore for each grade level, right? Like you had some, I forget what they are, moons and physics and so forth. So why did we choose the ones that we chose to sample? Do we lack in those areas currently that we're choosing those as like a fill-in? Or is it because like, are we really, really good at that already? And we want to compare apples to apples and you know what I mean? Like if we already have a moon program, I know that sounds dorky, but say we were talking about the moon, and then we have Open SciEd, and we can compare what we've done in the past with the new Open SciEd. So that we're really comparing, we know what we're comparing. Like, why did we choose, that's a long way of saying, why did we choose the areas that we are to explore?
We chose the units because they are similar units in
they
that
are.
grade level.
Okay.
And so weather and weather, right?
Okay.
Chemical reactions and chemical reactions. So trying to choose something that's consistent, so that for two reasons. One, for what you're talking about in terms of looking at the comparison, but the other is that wanting to not upend the scope and sequence at this point.
That makes sense.
And try to keep things as consistent as possible. So it really was looking for a comparable unit that they could take a look at and see. We know that they're going to be different. That's part of the benefit of looking at something.
Right. That's what I was hoping for, but I wasn't sure. I hadn't asked that question before. So that's all I have. Anything else, guys?
For my review of Open SciEd, I reviewed the website and the curriculum. I didn't feel comfortable with moving forward right now with the pilot program. That's my opinion.
With just, even though it's almost free and just having those couple.
Yeah, I mean, $7,000 is what you pointed out for 1 year.
No, that was actually for.
That's our current
It's
resource.
actually, iQuest would be 7,000. Open SciEd is
I'm
almost
saying that's a
nothing
cost of right now. You know, that's what we're paying right now.
for iQuest.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's what I'm saying. So
That's our current resource.
I understand that. That's what I'm saying. I'm saying if it's working, I don't feel comfortable moving forward with this one, and that $7,000 is an expense that we've already budgeted, obviously. So
Well, but
just
we
because
have,
it's free doesn't mean it's great. That's the thing.
well, right, but what it does is it allows us the opportunity to explore it through this year before we decide whether or not it's actually a good program or not. And the $7,000 is being spent no matter what, and it's only one unit for each grade level, correct? Or maybe two?
Two for, I think one of them has the
For one of
chemical
them, I thought there
reactions.
was
It's a
two.
double.
So we're not investing a lot of time and energy and no money unless we get a couple of the books to test the waters of this and decide like next year or in May, whether or not it's something we want to pursue or not.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm not completely for it. I'm just saying I'm my review, I would like to table it. That's what I'm saying.
Are the
I'm
topics?
concerned about,
sorry.
sorry. I'm concerned about tabling it though, because we want to allow our science teachers to like put this into their curriculum for the school year without disrupting it, as you were saying. So I'll just go back to the moon. If we have something on the moon coming up, you know, like we don't want to wait because we want to be able to teach it then, you know, in the normal sequence of the school year.
You know, I had some concerns too. Just in a brief review I did online, and really there's a couple things, right? We have a lot of work in front of us, I think. Just in making sure we pick the right literacy program and then solve that problem. So I'm a little bit concerned that if we put time and energy into this thing, it could potentially take away from that to some extent, just because we're working with finite resources and we really need to get that right. So that's my first thought. My second thought, just in looking at some of the data online, I just played around on their website. I saw some information on there, relative to COVID-19 and health equity science. And, I know that's not really being looked at on this pilot that you're proposing, but it was still concerning to me because I just felt that without really knowing and fully vetting the program, I didn't really want our kids to be the guinea pigs in a pilot. And it's just and it has been a divisive issue for us that in our community. I think that we focus on things that are more going to unite our community and not necessarily create more division than we already have. So I on that front, I agree with Matthew that I think that now is not the right time to be investing time and energy into this. And I think we really should really focus our efforts, especially I wasn't aware of a major science issue. I know there's a big literacy concern that we have. And I just feel that at this point, our district will be best served by solving that with all of our time and energy.
She has something to say, Stacy.
I was just gonna ask on page 8, are these the only topics that would be covered for 6, 7, and 8?
This year.
On page,
I think it's page 9. Page 9.
Page 9 represents the whole scope and sequence. The topics to be covered are on page 6. 6th grade is looking at thermal energy. 7th grade would be doing chemical reactions and matter. And then looking at Earth's resources as a connected. And then Earth and space science at 8th grade with the option there's an option to explore more in 6th grade and 8th grade.
Okay, thank you.
One of the concerns that I have with what you're saying, Tony, though, is that by allowing this pilot to happen, this is during the school year, we're not going to be addressing it at all until like after the school year. So it will be next May. When we're talking about our literacy program, we should have decisions by then, far before then. So we're not just taking we are taking one thing at a time, just because that's the way it's going to work. One of my concerns too is in the past, we've said, math came first and now we're dealing with literacy when we really needed to deal with probably both simultaneously. So if there are issues in science and ways that we can improve that system, I would rather not hold off and at least try to gain some understanding of what we're looking at throughout the school year.
In that case, I'd like to see more options because I wasn't comfortable with what I found online. And I'd rather not spend time and energy piloting something that I feel is going to just lead to more division in the long run.
Okay. Any more comments or questions?
Stacy, do you have any comments at all?
Okay. So, let's see, let me go back here. Hang on a second.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a big problem, I'd like to see more options, but I'm not comfortable with what I saw.
Pam, how did we come to this this source?
The science team did a review.
They did. And were there other recommendations or just this one?
These are the most current resources for science. There's not, in terms of aligning to the next generation science standards, these are the ones that come most highly rated. But I would have to go back to the team and touch base with them on the options to look at additional current resources.
Are there any other questions or comments?
You want to say anything?
Okay, so I guess at this time, I'm going to request a motion for the adoption of the middle school science book resource for piloting. Do I have a motion? Okay, hearing none, the motion does not pass. Sorry. Okay, next on the agenda. That was much faster than I thought it would be. Sorry, guys. I should have my iPad pulled up at the same time.
It might be me.
I think it's code of conduct.
It is.
Code of conduct?
It's code of conduct.
I can just have a few updates, we made a commitment to give you updates every month. And so here's a few things. Pam, Lynette Seminar, and I continue to collaborate about how do we continue to grow K-12 programming around character education or behaviors. So that we have a monthly, sometimes more, session around those things. And how do we collaborate to continue to push forward? The next update I have is that we have the next ad hoc committee meeting on October 24th. And there's a few agenda items. One of the ones that we really want to talk about is the 5500 Club. And how do we bring stakeholders together to continue to kind of conversations about behaviors or character in our district. I think it's also important for us to get some feedback from that group, the ad hoc committee, about the measures that we will use to say the work around character and behaviors is working. So we want to bring that conversation to them for feedback. So how will we measure the work? The third thing I wrote down here is we've received some feedback about the utilization of Infinite Campus. I think that's an ongoing conversation, but we did re-communicate to our building leaders to use Infinite Campus, and we gave them 2 tools to continue to professional develop folks on how to use that. One was kind of screenshots from Infinite Campus, how to use it, and then our friends at Lincoln created a video tutorial. So those are just 2 resources that we provided to continue to grow the capacity to use Infinite Campus. Yes,
Do you
please.
have any issues with compliance with using this from any facility leaders?
No, I don't. I would say we have 0 compliance issues. There are different models to get to IC, and that's part of the conversation.
Can you elaborate?
Sure. We have one, I think at least one building that is asking teachers to use a Google form to capture the behavior,
Okay.
and then someone else puts it in IC.
Is that cumbersome?
I don't believe so.
Yeah.
It's not cumbersome to the teacher because they're inputting the behavior, whether it's in IC or Google, but it's different from other buildings. So we want to have a conversation about that.
That's kind of what I know.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then the last thing that I wrote here is that we continue to receive positive feedback around the code of conduct. I think someone from Lincoln mentioned that, and the start of the year. So those are things that we should be celebrating. That's what I have for code of conduct today.
Okay, thanks, Jason.
Thank you.
All right, next is our disproportionality update, and Vivian, if you want to start.
Yeah, thank you. Similar to the code of conduct, we committed to just giving and providing an update on a regular basis about how we are allocating the required portion of our special education funding to meet the needs of our students who are identified as being that lowest 25% of performers in our classrooms. So the good news is our plan was approved. So the plan that Lynette worked really, really hard on is approved. So then the next step will be, we will hear from DPI about what portion of our budget will be allocated for the next portion of our disproportionality audit. So we had a little bit of money that we were required to spend on the back end of this portion yet. So I just wanted to provide an update about how that portion is being met right now. We have a number of schools who are requesting the zones of regulation, which is a resource where students learn a system to identify their emotions. They have an understanding of how their emotions are working, and then it provides teachers with a common language to help that student learn strategies
What
in
is
order
that called again?
zones of regulation.
Is it like the book of feelings?
It does, yep, it
is
talks
that
about
in
like green is
Yeah.
happy and good to
Okay,
go,
good.
yep.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it actually started as a resource for students with autism,
Yeah.
and it's just a great, consistent tool for all
We had a
students.
general ed student at a facility today that is using that at an elementary level.
Great.
So there you go.
Yeah.
There's your feedback.
So that's awesome. So we have that resource that's being distributed to teachers and then some teachers participating in staff development around the implementation of that. It's an online virtual webinar training, just so
Probably
again,
very low cost as well, right?
I think no cost
Oh, really?
with the
Like a
webinar.
public cost.
Some of those manipulatives
Sorry.
might, no.
I just want to highlight.
That's all Lynette and her team. So those, along those lines, the general and behavior support specialists are receiving subs. So we'll pay for subs to cover for them in the classroom so that they can go into classrooms of their colleagues who might be struggling with some challenging behavior or just need some observations and another set of eyes to support work with students. So that's another part of where some of that money is going to, is covering the cost of subs for those general behavior specialists to support their colleagues.
Behavior specialist.
General education behavior specialists that we have in each building that Lynette is responsible for overseeing and collaborating with. They're called JEBs, if you've heard that acronym thrown around. But the JEBs they're teachers. And I believe Lynette did a little bit of an explanation, or provided an explanation of what their role is. But they're teachers in our buildings who have their own classrooms to run and manage, but they have a passion for supporting colleagues around helping meet the needs of all learners in the classrooms. So what they do is, because they don't necessarily have free time built into their school day, a sub can cover for them so they can go in and then support their colleagues, come up with ideas like the implementation of zones of regulation, or maybe some ideas to try some other tools in the classroom to help students that maybe need like flexible seating, for example, because they're struggling to attend a task, or might need some noise canceling headphones because they can be distracted easily during work time. Just help with supports and ideas and problem solving to help students be more successful in their classrooms.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No.
I just brought this attention to myself. Our paraprofessionals that we have had to adjust their wage because of the reduction in COVID funds. Is this a possible avenue for supplementing that wage?
I probably can't speak really
We look into that.
really thoroughly to wages right now, just where I'm at in learning my new role.
That's because there's a concern of our need for paraprofessionals in the special ed, obviously. And obviously we've lost some of them because of the wage that we are offering.
And I know, even based on our strategic plan input, that retention of employees is a focus and a commitment and something that I think all stakeholders feel strongly about. So I know those conversations.
Sure. Sorry.
No, it's good. Good point.
Right.
So along the zones of regulation, we just have, we're purchasing some sensory tools. Like I said, flexible seating and noise canceling headphones are two examples of those to just help students be more successful. And then subbing in order to free up those JEBs to go support their colleagues. So once we know what we are required to spend, when DPI gives that of our next budget cycle, then I will share out, there will be some more information about larger professional development projects, staff development projects, and probably larger resource purchases. But this is just how we're finishing out the end of this cycle.
So thanks, Katie, for the update. Was that zones of regulation that you mentioned, was that something that we were doing before, or is that?
Yes, it's been widely utilized in some of our buildings. And it's been a special education resource for students for significant amount of time. We've just found that it's a tool that works well for all students, especially our younger students. So I think now having Lynette and her team that has some district-wide consistency, we're having a better capacity to share out resources to one another, where maybe it was just someone had a passion about it or more experience about it, working with that tool in one building, and now we can share those resources more district-wide.
Okay. And just to confirm my understanding from the last time that we followed on this, if there's any new programs that do come up that we're gonna spend those funds on, we would all get a chance to review them as a team and just make sure they're aligned with our values and everything.
Yes, absolutely. So
For most
anything
students.
that's coming out of the new budget requirement, then anything that's those larger scale professional developments or resource allocations, I'll bring to this committee first.
All right, thanks, Katie. Any other questions for Katie? No? Okay, thanks so much. The next one is discussion on learning walks, and I believe that Jason is going to talk about
Yes, thank you. Pre-pandemic, the curriculum committee would engage in 3 to 4 learning walks a year. And they've gone away, so I just wanted to have a conversation about the interest. And so I wanted to define what a learning walk is first, and then answer the questions and see if there's interest. And so when we talk about a learning walk, what we've done in the past was selected a school. I think one time we went to Madison Elementary. And so we spent, the curriculum committee, Pam, myself, sat with the principal for 15 to 20 minutes, talking about their goals for their school, any challenges they're facing, any successes, and a little bit about the classrooms that we would be going to observe. We'd split ourselves into 3 teams, partnerships, and go visit different classrooms for about 20 minutes. So for example, I think Kathy and I went to go see a kindergarten class for 20 minutes. Pam and another committee member saw a different classroom, and another principal and the 3rd committee member went to a different classroom for about 20 minutes to observe. We returned to the principal's office for another 20 minutes, so it's about an hour time, and just debriefed about what we saw in the classroom. I believe we received some positive feedback from the committee. We received positive feedback from the principal for the opportunity, and our teachers enjoy the opportunity to showcase the work. And so with that, the question is, do we have interest and time to engage in something similar?
And before anyone asks questions, because I did go on one learning walk as a board member, and it was at Madison. And I have to share with you that leading up to this point, I was very, very skeptical about the advantages that we had in playing math games. We heard a lot about math games leading up to this. And I again, just was very kind of cross-eyed looking at it.
Can you explain what math games are to him?
Math games?
You probably know what it is.
I used to play.
Well, and that's why I was leading up to this. What's that?
Okay.
You do know what it is, Tony?
I used like flashcards, or are you
No,
talking about
it's not
something like?
No, it's not, but I kind of explain some of that in a moment. But it just sounded like kids were playing, right? And I didn't really know what it was until I went to Madison and had the chance to see it in action, and walked away really understanding the value that it adds for kids, and that they actually get excited about learning about math skills. And I had a very different viewpoint walking into that classroom with my skepticism, and walked out being knowledgeable and fully understanding the idea behind it and why it works in our schools. So essentially, when the kindergartners were there, I mean, this is a couple of years ago now, or it seems like a really long time ago. I wish I could remember everything, but you know, they would do things like, let's say with dice, and have to like put them in the right category or add them together. But they were just these little games that would last like just a couple minutes each. But yet they would have to fill out the sheets and learn those skills. Do you remember some of them specifically, Jason?
Yeah, there were some shapes, so students would play with shapes and build different, 3D models with shapes to really get some hands on. I believe many of the games with the dice also ask our students to create a graph, so they're making graphs without even saying you're making a graph, right? And so it's just ways to engage our learners K through 5 in mathematical play that enhances the learning and gets them closer to discourse and achieving those standards.
Yeah, I was just really impressed by it. So for me, the learning walk was a very valuable tool to see. So we just wanted to throw that in there. It's something that I talked about actually quite often because it really did make a difference for me. So the big question now is, would you be interested in doing something like that? How many? What's your availability? That kind of thing.
I just want.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
So this is a perfect example of how one thing can mean many different things. So you just articulated about math games.
Mhm.
And I thought from your substituting perspective, you knew what math games on the website was.
Hmm.
And do you know what that is?
No,
Okay, so when I've substituted the district,
I never did.
you
No.
might know this, obviously, but there's a website that's called mathgames.com. And it is, it's pretty much video games.
Oh,
So that's what I thought you were talking about right now.
oh, no.
So that's why it's important to define what we're talking about.
Yeah, it's part of why it's valuable just to go. and
So
see
I just
into
wanted
action.
to, I'm sorry that
Yeah,
I
no,
thought we were
that's
talking about mathgames.com,
No.
the online website that we unfortunately saw students playing games when they should be working on things.
Oh,
So
no,
you're talking about something completely different.
completely different.
So
Yeah.
thank you for you explaining that.
Yeah, it was really good to see. So I don't know what your interest would be in kind of like, I'm saying rejuvenating the learning blocks. But again, I thought it was really valuable and I guess I would recommend that we do some, even if it was just one of them, So yeah, again, it's about your availability. I'm far more available during the day than maybe the two of you are, so.
I'd be interested. I mean, we'd have to look at scheduling that and what time you're thinking, but I've been, I had the opportunity last year to visit Jefferson and I got to observe a teacher there, the third class, and it was great. I think just seeing the kids, they were all excited to learn and, the teacher did a great job and it was, I think just having that perspective and just seeing the kids is always fun, with smiles on their faces and learning, so.
Yeah, and it kind of brings home like what we're doing all of this for, right? Because we see those kids in action. So I guess what I'm hearing from the two of you.
I'm 100% supportive of it. Obviously,
Okay.
logistically, we have to figure out, if we can't all make it at the same time, maybe we do it, maybe we don't, but I would love to do it. Yeah.
So I guess at this
Sorry.
point, I would just say, can we try one? Arrange one and see what we can come up with for a schedule to, and then we can go from there. If we can do more, that'd be great, but let's start with one. What do you think?
Sounds great.
Okay.
What I would do is thank you, and I think it's called the doodle poll, like give you some dates and times,
Mhm.
and we'll look for a date and time where all three of you are available.
Okay.
And we'll start with that, and like Kathy said, if it's fruitful and beneficial, then we'll schedule the next one.
Wouldn't necessarily all have to be there. I mean, we'd like to, but obviously.
It-
We prefer it, but it's not that.
Yeah. That'd be
Just,
super. Let's try it. Yeah. All right.
And we'll throw out a number of dates, so we'll try to.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, and then the next was, I think, Jason, too, you were gonna talk on the Washington DC trip.
I think Tony had requested this, so I don't know if you had some specific questions. I wrote some notes down as a starting point. I'm comfortable either way if you want me to start or if you have some questions.
Yeah, maybe I could just provide some runway for everyone else who may not be familiar. I had a parent reach out to me that has a student over at Washington. And she had mentioned to me that her child was unable to go to the DC trip, but the kids at Wilson were going, or had the opportunity to go. And her kid was, by her account, a good kid and, not a troublemaker or anything. And it just sounds like the kids over there, if I understood it right, don't have the opportunity to go, which didn't seem very fair to me. So I just wanted to learn more about, I guess, how that came to be and just, see if, what the reasoning behind that is. And if there's a way to let, good students and good kids, if they want to go, that, I think they should be able to go.
Yeah, so I have a little bit of historical pieces here. Some of them are pre my entrance in MPSD, so it's from second sources. But again, prior to my being in MPSD, there was two middle school, actually two junior high school Washington DC trips, one for Washington and one for Wilson, and that's been a long-standing tradition. This is where it's a little hazy, right? At some point, Washington did not have a Washington DC trip. And when it was founded, what I believe is the case, that became the case because there was no champion to lead the charge. So it wasn't based on student behavior. It was based on, we need adults to be the champion of that. So the last several, I don't know the last year, but the last several Washington DC trips have been Wilson students. The next thing I wrote down is that there is currently no Washington DC trip on the books. There's been some discussions, but no plans, okay? And so we brought this to the director team, I think last week. So we have support from a financial lens from Angela and Jim, so we're appreciative of that. I've scheduled time with Mr. Masters and Mr. Erlinson to talk about what this would look like. We're connecting next Thursday to take this feedback, and we know we want to provide high level opportunities for all kids. And then anything that we plan beyond that will come to this committee for consideration. And so that's where we're at right now.
What was the spirit of the trip? Looking at Washington DC as a whole, what was the scope of the trip?
I think it's just a cultural hub for our country and lots of history. So one of the lead champions of that trip at Wilson was Sonia Bolchin, social studies.
Okay, that's what I'm getting into. Obviously, you understand what I'm going to say next is why don't we collaborate that the social studies department at, Washington promote it, and if any students want to be involved in it, they communicate it with the champion at Wilson, and we make a united effort to go to Washington DC. And if we need more chaperones or champions, we solicit it, and then if they come on to it, then they come on to it.
That's certainly part of the discussion.
That's what we're trying to get to, right?
And as you well know, to organize a middle school trip to Washington DC is pretty likened to an act of Congress, right? And so it is time intensive for the adults, and they take it seriously. They do a lot of educating to our students about the expectations for the trip when they are there. And we've had success. We have a high level of expectation, and our students meet it, and we want to maintain that. So we need to be mindful, as we always are, of the time commitment for our adults. And so we're going to work through that, and we'll bring it here when anything is written down as a plan.
Is there a scheduled date that this is going to happen next year or this year?
It's traditionally, I believe they leave the Saturday after graduation. But again, there is no plan for this June as of today.
Thank you.
You will?
So just maybe give us an update on that next month.
Yeah, absolutely.
Since you guys are meeting next week, that would be great.
Thank you.
You will?
Okay. And then moving on, the last item actually is our meeting schedule. And I know I'm mostly to blame for this one because I'm looking at trying to clear my Tuesdays as much as possible, which I know you guys are aware of just because of our standard board meetings. And in the past, as a committee, we've met on Thursdays. So I did talk to these three lovely people and mentioned it to them too, because of course they have very busy schedules also. So again, maybe what are we calling it? A doodlebug survey?
A doodle poll, I think it's
Doodle
called.
poll?
Call it a doodler.
But does anyone have objections to changing it from Tuesdays to a different day?
No, not at all.
Tony?
What day are you thinking? Thursday or?
Sure.
I mean,
It's really just Tuesdays that I'm trying to clear.
I guess we have to accommodate. So is Wednesday filled up now, or can we do it Wednesday?
Right. That's what I was wondering.
Because we're going to be moving our regular meetings to Wednesday, right? Is that?
Just the one a month,
Okay.
or
so-
the
so-
fourth Wednesday of the month. So maybe running it by Lori to see what our overall schedule is with committees, and you guys coming up with your schedules too, and we can try to coordinate a doodle poll
is what.
Doodle poll. I've got a brain function. This fire going on here.
Would we be looking to schedule something differently before November 15th? Or would we be looking to make an adjustment for December and beyond?
I think starting November.
So just November 15th would not be the date.
Right.
Okay.
If we could change that, that would be great.
And so what I'm hearing is another doodler.
Yeah.
I think what he's saying, I'm guessing, I don't assume, but of the first and third are the options versus second and fourth. We don't want to add another meeting, is that right?
I think we should just try to shift the day and keep the week, but shift.
Yeah, that's
to a
fine. I
different
mean,
day.
it doesn't matter to me. It's just about
Doesn't matter to me
Tuesdays.
either. I'm just trying to
Yeah.
make it easy for people.
Yeah, so like possibly Thursdays of the second Thursday of the month, because that's what we're meeting now, right? Second Thursday. Third, there's. The meeting's going too long. Does that work for everybody?
Third
The third
Thursday.
Thursday, like as one of the options?
17th, you're saying, for next month?
Yeah, I can make that work right now.
I mean, still maybe do a doodle poll. I don't know, my schedule with
I
me.
don't think
just
it's
silly.
necessary unless they have a conflict, but I can make it work too.
You could too?
Same
Okay.
time slot, I can make it work.
Yeah,
I'll
So-
make it work, is what I'm trying to say.
okay.
Third Thursday. Let Katie, Pam and I just triple check our
Your schedules?
calendars.
Yeah,
And then if that does work, we'll just change the invite versus
Okay.
the Zoom invite.
that'd be super. Thank you.
They don't want me playing chess anymore, so I gotta do other.
Oh, we played chess. Okay, well, thanks guys for that. I appreciate it. Is there anything else? I guess nothing else is actually on our agenda, so I guess I would.
Can you
see-
make something else? Because you're not gonna break the record and I'm a little disappointed on that.
I'm sorry, Susie, to let you down that way, but I
Okay,
think I'm
All right.
tired and I'm hungry. That's not the first time I've said that at a meeting. I'm seeking for a motion to
I'll make a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn the meeting.
All right, first and looking for a second.
I want to keep it going. I'm just kidding. I'll second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, guys. We accomplished a lot in like 45 minutes, so that was good.
Do we have beds?
My husband was always just like, well, how long is this one gonna last? I'm like, I don't know. We got a long agenda. It's gonna be a while.